The meeting is officially opened. Njabuling, I can see that you still want to socialize. You can meet them during tea time if we'll have. Excuse me. Morning, everybody in the meeting. Good morning. Huh? Are you speechless? But it's not cold in Cape Town. It's only Eastern Cape and ETDM, Eastern Cape, floods and snow. But here it's not as cold as, so I think we can say morning. Morning once more. Okay. No, I'm not going to, I know that Mr. Kekan is looking at me to make the welcoming remarks as long as I want. I'm not going to do that today. You are all welcome in a meeting. And today we have to finish by 1 o'clock, Honorable Njabuling. We won't be rushing you, chop and chop and chop, but we will try to make everything that was supposed to make, but we must look at the time and be cautious about the time. Remember, we have to travel also to ICC, and then we have to honor that. When the speaker gets in, when it's said, the speaker, we have to be there by that time. So I can see it's full house in your presence from the side of you, Chair, and also a minister is here. I know for a fact that he is going to get in and get out, get in and get out. But the DM is also here. Thank you very much. You are all welcome. More honorable members, you are stunning today. I don't know what's happening, whether it's because of these lights. It's quite been, Oh, thank you very much. You are all welcome. Our guests that have joined us and also our media, everybody that is here, backup staff, you are welcome. And today we are just going to get into the business of the day. We're not going to make long speeches, understanding that we will be celebrating or enjoying the Youth Month, which is very critical for us. I always say that. I'm sure as a mother and a father, I'm also concerned about this thing of looking after our youth. Secretary, there is the agenda. Honorable members, I don't know, it's on this side. And on the other side, it's yellow. On the other side, it's creamish. I've done the welcoming, but I don't think there's a need of introduction. We don't have anyone new, except to say that we've got guests that have joined us, which at least we welcome, but we won't have time to introduce themselves after the meeting. We do have business cards now, some of us, others don't. They will write on papers and give you numbers. So don't worry about it. Let's exchange the numbers and also be free to talk to one another at any time, 24/7. Arico Secretary, tell Lorraine to wait for us to talk to you overnight. Yes, 24/7. You are all welcome. Let's have this thing of apologies, Arico, and we also we also go to the agenda as proposed. But start with the apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Just the following apologies, Chair, or requests. Mr. Milam requesting if he can leave at around 11:30 plus minus, Chair. And then the Minister also indicated, as you've indicated, that he'll be leaving at around 10:30, Chair. So those are the apologies received. Thank you, Chair.
Are you able to hear, ma'am? Oh, that's good. Oh, your ears are sharp, because even myself, I don't even hear him. I'll have to get the, hearing aids, to hear. But we've taken note of all the apologies. We hope that Honorable Milam will chop. By that time we will leave, we will be done half of. Can I request honorable members to, Honorable Fassi?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to move for the adoption of the agenda as presented.
There is the agenda adopted by Honorable Fasia. Any second, honorable members? Honorable Wembata. Honorable Moses Mbata is seconding the adoption of the agenda. And I think the apologies have been accepted as they have been tabled. Let's go to the next item. The next item, it's not there, but when the minister or the DM is present with us, we always give them time to have the political overview on what is it that we should expect and what is it that we shouldn't expect. So I'm going to give him to give us a political overview to open up the meeting. Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you. Good morning to esteemed members of the Portfolio Committee and members of the public here present. Chair, just to thank you and the committee for acceding to my request to leave at 10:30. Is not out of disrespect. There's a few items in cabinet that requires my presence. So I really want to state that upfront. We have, myself and the DM, committed previously that we'll subject ourselves to the authority and the scrutiny of the Portfolio Committee. So I want to express my most sincere appreciation, but the DM will be here on behalf of the leadership of the ministry to make interventions to the extent that they will require her attention. And also just to state that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I received an inquiry from Honorable Prince Nchabileng in relation to the announcement in relation to bid window number 3 on battery energy storage solutions. And that inquiry was raising a number of issues regarding, and I'm paraphrasing, the transparency of the process and that the process could have been compromised. I did indicate that we will give a comprehensive response to Honorable Crown Prince Nchabileng. I think we have done so. If we haven't done so, I'm sure it's on its way to Honorable Nchabileng. I had already signed it off, I think 3 days or 4 days, having received an inquiry. We also received an inquiry from the Black Business Council, and I think we're also going to privilege them with the response. But we want to take that further, Chair, because I think first is that the inquiry by Honorable Nchabileng is appropriate in that it is important that the executive gets to account to first the public and also the Portfolio Committee on how public procurement is conducted in the country. And our suggestion, Chair, as I've written to you, is to request that we occasion a dedicated sitting wherein we'll consider the issues in relation to that bid window. And then I'll bring the independent power procurement office because it's the one that runs that process, so that there's an appreciation that there's an arm's length relationship between the IPPO office and the executive. ESCOM is in no way involved in the procurement of new generation capacity. ESCOM and of course NTCSA is the buyer, so it is the IPP office that will come and lay bare the facts. First is the procurement process itself, the bid specification, the scoring. All of those things will be made public, because I think that we must habituate the executive subjecting itself to public scrutiny. So we welcome that. And we'll welcome any other intervention in the future on issues of public scrutiny. And we'll hide nothing from the Portfolio Committee. And of course, by extension to the public. And that's the spirit with which we looked at the inquiry by Honorable Crown Prince Nchabileng, is that the public has the right to know, and then will come and subject the process to that scrutiny. And I want to repeat, all of the information should be public and will be made public. And to the extent that the portfolio committee is not satisfied, they are of the opinion that there are particular missteps or there's further action that ought to be taken, we'll subject ourselves to the counsel of the portfolio committee. So the point I'm making is that we're open to that and any other question that comes across. I'm making this point because the integrity of the process is sacrosanct. These investments that we require are predicated on a process that is beyond reproach, a process that can survive public scrutiny, and with any misconceptions or factual findings with regards to a process that is compromised, what it will do is going to obliterate our public procurement exercise and undermine our ability to raise money in the debt capital markets to finance this investment. So I, as indicated, Chair, I've written to you, and I know that it's receiving consideration. I really want to say to the members, we'll subject ourselves to that, and we'll bring the parties that have been at the forefront of that program. On the matters before us, Chair, is just two broad issues. The first one is that the principal piece of legislation that governs electricity in the country, the Electricity Regulation Act, the amendment, does provide for the creation of the independent systems operator. And I want to give comfort that it is our intention to introduce the independent systems operator. It does provide that it should be in place within 5 years of the Act coming into operation. Of course, that's the time frame that is determined in the Act. It doesn't mean that we have to wait for 5 years. So I want to give you comfort that it's something that is receiving our attention. And then the second one is around investments in the transmission space. So this is governed by, first is the integrated resource plan that is has been with NEDLEC since late last year. NEDLEC is following its own process. The assurance we got from NEDLEC is that by end of this month, we should receive feedback from NEDLEC, and those comments will be incorporated in the final design of the IRP, which Cabinet will consider, and it will go out as a IRP that has been approved, and that will determine the pace and scale, the sources, and the cost of a new generation capacity that will undergird the South African economy. But also the same IRP, so working on IRP 2019, it does envisage the acceleration of clean sources of energy, and in particular renewables. And of course, what has been very public, I've stated this before, and we have shared with the committee the work we are doing to expand and modernize the grid. The TDP, which is the Transmission Development Plan, anticipate that we should build about 14,000 kilometers of new lines, and the initial computation suggests that we require 440 billion rands. The sovereign balance sheet will not be able to carry that because the sovereign matrix has deteriorated. Part of the reason why budget, is it 2.0 or 3.0? The budget is 3.0.
3.0.
Yes, it's because we are grappling with the revenue side versus the expenditure side. All the key fiscal matrices are going south as a result of an economy that is not functioning. So we can't burden if you like, the sovereign balance sheet with providing a backstop for this investment, what you, in financial technical terms, they refer to as a sovereign guarantee. The ESCOM balance sheet, the NTCSA balance sheet is not strong enough to finance that. So we're introducing a bespoke financing instrument that will be backed by a credit guarantee vehicle, essentially freeing the sovereign balance sheet from providing a backstop and it is also a credit guarantee vehicle that will provide a backstop for investment in the transmission side. I want to emphasize, and there's a point I made earlier on, transmission is a natural monopoly. By that, I mean the state will never relinquish ownership of the transmission. So we'll share with you some of the work that we are doing there. And as I conclude, I did say too, perhaps the last point is to say that we're doing everything possible to ensure that within the rules of a competitive market, as ushered in by the ERA, is that the ESCOM continues to be a supplier of choice. What do I mean by that? ESCOM continues to be the backstop, so we can make all these interventions we are making. There could be private generation and procurement of electricity in the country. If those transactions fail, your default is ESCOM. There is no private sector generator who's going to invest his or her money, tens of millions of rand, with the intention of supplying deep slot. It just doesn't happen because they want their returns. Their returns must be competitive. Who will provide for the poor? Who will provide for informal settlement? Who will lead the charge on a universal access? It is ESCOM because it is meant to play that role as a driver of development in the country, underpinning energy generation. So ESCOM will be supported. We will come back to you and share with you the work that ESCOM is doing on new generation capacity across all the technologies. I emphasize across all the technologies. And then ESCOM can't just be a buyer, an NTCSA, a buyer of electricity, just sits there and all we do is to procure. ESCOM will enter into that space. And I'm confident that with the leadership there led by Mr. Marokane, that we are ready now to enter that space, compete with the private sector players, and ensure that the ESCOM becomes an efficient provider of electricity in the country. So we'll compete with the private sector and ensure that the developmental agenda of the country continues to be protected. And of course, we will continue to enhance private sector participation because it's de-risking generation, because there's been an over-concentration on one entity. With the challenges that ESCOM has experienced, it has dragged the country with it. So we need to de-risk that space, so that is a given. So you can do both, ensuring that ESCOM continues to participate, play a big role, and also ensuring that there's private sector participation. So Chair, I thought that I must situate the presentation in that sense so that when the team comes to present a more elaborate presentation, at least the overarching political consideration and the political economy of energy as through the lenses of the ministry is understood in that sense. So it's meant to complement that work. The NTCSA does not replace ESCOM, is a subsidiary. It's going to complement. So there's no competition. There's a degree of complementarity in that. Of course, we still need to clean. So what we mean by that, I do accept that it's not as clinical as we want it to be. But I'm sure with time we'll keep on updating the committee so that there's a collective appreciation of the work that we're doing. Thanks, Chair, for extending the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I think you have answered the questions even ourselves have. I can see now we are joined by the CEO of ESCOM. And Tina, we don't know these things. NTCA, whatever. One ESCOM ka. Mbane, it's ESCOM, whatever that is happening. But I want to assure you, CEO of ESCOM, we are always with Uma Pelo here. He's always present in our meeting. So we hope and we think that is supposed to be a link between yourselves and Nati. So by presence yake in our meetings, most of them, Sithemba ukuthi you always get it. Mina, I ask a first question that, what does that mean? NTCA, and what is that now? And what are they going to do we have on these new names and all these abbreviations, but I happen to understand and know what is it that they are doing. I'm happy, Minister, when you say they are not competing to one another. Instead, they are complementing one another. So it's clear to us. Chairperson of, I'm not sure whether should we give over to you to delegate your team according to the presentations. And when you present, I request you to introduce yourself before you present. Now, we can't say open up the video. You are here. Just introduce yourselves when you and delegate your group as you want. Over to you, Chairperson. ATM, is there something that he has forgotten to talk about it? Minister, ulibele something?
No, she was just,
Ngiyakubona uyakuluma
No,
luma indlebe yakho
she was
and
saying I've said everything.
Yeah.
Yes, she was just,
Okay, over to you, Chairperson.
Morning, Chair. Start first by introducing myself. My name is Priscilla Mabelani. I am the chairperson of the National Transmission Company of South Africa, Chair. It's a wholly subsidiary of ESCOM, and we are supported by the Energy Regulatory Amendment Act that the Minister has already alluded to. It's a privilege to visit the committee and to come and present the key mandates that we have been entrusted with on behalf of the South African government to lead, and we're looking forward to the insights today. There's one slide that I thought I would just maybe kick off with at a high level. We do recognize that there's been a clearly outlined agenda for today, but we thought that we should just perhaps start with some key overview of where we've been as an organization. As Minister indicated, we are a newly formed baby, and at the same time, we are transitioning and yet expected to deliver at a catalytic level. And I'm really privileged to say that on behalf of the NTCSA team, you have a highly committed team that is dedicated, that's been supporting this, but also to extend my appreciation to the ministry as well as a shareholder ESCOM that has been supportive during this significant transformation. I think it's appropriate that I start with what we believe is the heartbeat of our organization, which is safety and reliable operations. So it's quite important that before we get into how much and at what scale are we expanding, that we continue to ensure that we keep our people, our contractors safe, and our communities safe as well, that we continue to provide reliable operations to sustain the integrity of the power system. When Mr. Skeepers, our interim CEO, speaks, he'll articulate some of the, in addition to the expansion, the key elements that we are driving around refurbishment and maintaining of our assets as well during this period. But fundamentally, as ministers indicated, we're expanding at pace, 14,500 kilometers of line. Those are very risky, and we're executing this in remote areas. So ensuring that our people are continue to be trained, that we have the right safety systems and processes becomes quite important, and that we save life. So we would like everyone to go home safely. That also then gets followed by some of the key highlights that we have managed to achieve since the last time we were here. And the key element for us is that as a regulated entity, we've worked with a shareholder to ensure that we submit our revenue determination. That was quite critical to set a foundation for the execution of the ambitious investment that we need to make. That has now been finalized. It's been ring-fenced for the different divisions as well as NTSA as a separate legal entity. And that enables us to be able to execute with certainty so that we don't start and stop. And then complemented by the private sector, as the minister has already alluded to. In addition to that, we have finalized our corporate plan. I just want to again to highlight to the committee that the corporate plan is really informed by the minister's strategic priorities, which gets cascaded to the shareholder ESCOM and then through to us. So the elements that are mandated and managed through us are in that corporate plan. And now we are executing quarterly in line with that corporate plan. key as we transition is taking lessons learned, and Dan and I speak regularly and also with the business. The issues of major projects and what has happened in the past are quite critical. So with the support of the group, we have to make sure that we deepen the capabilities, issues of business control, financial controls, to ensure that as we move forward, we continue to have audited financial statements that are unqualified. It's a key priority for us. So as a board, over the last couple of months into the year, this will be our first full year reporting. We have spent a lot of time ensuring that those systems of controls are in place. And I think the one point that we're here for, as outlined in the program, which is the execution of the build program. From a board perspective, we want to highlight, and you'll see as our interim CEO is speaking, that this is a major step up, as I mentioned, and we are appreciative and really supporting the minister in the journey of bringing the private sector to support not only from a balance sheet and a financial capacity, but also from a delivery as well. So we are working together with the ministry to ensure that we deliver on the infrastructure. However, what we've been focusing on last year was what I call front-end loading, to make sure that we actually do proper, deep project prep. We take the lessons learned in the past and ensure that issues of servitudes, land rights are in place to be able to give predictability to the execution. But at the same time, we've managed to also execute on the infrastructure build-out that we're committed to. I do recognize the hockey stick, and part of that is really to make sure that the strategies, whether sourcing strategies that are required to deliver that, are going to be quite important. With that, the issues of how do we ensure that we localized, particularly industrialization, are issues that we're working closely with the ministry to ensure that as we front-end load the sourcing strategies, particularly because the national transmission investments is a global phenomenon. We're seeing our peers globally as well in the space and moving at pace. So one of the things that we need to ensure is that where we can take advantage to localize and create our own industries, we're able to do that as we execute this major program. And our corporate plan articulates some of those targets that we need to achieve as we move forward. And then I think lastly is just to say that we recognize that during this transition, the system constraints are going to be there, and it's not going to be something that we unfold. And we recognize the work that the ministry has supported us with NESA in terms of the congestion curtailment framework that ensures that as we prioritize the deep bottlenecking of our substations and the building of the infrastructure, at the same time, we can start to create opportunity, particularly for the wind renewables, to be able to bring those on board as well, so that we can have a mix and a balanced mix of energy sources as we move forward. So with that, Chair, I would like to hand over to the interim CEO to take us through the presentation, but I just thought that I should give a context of the full organization on behalf of the NTSA team. We've got a very capable and energized team that's working behind the scene to support you, and I thank you. Over to you, Skhomozo.
Thank you, Ms. Mabelane, Chairperson. Good morning, and good morning to the honorable members. I will take you through the presentation, Chair. I'm joined here next to me by my colleague, Mr. Andrew Etzinger, and he'll take part 2 of the presentation, specifically focused on the market operator business and the developments. Chair, what we thought we should just share as part of the introduction of the company and where we are is to share with you this high-level strategy of the company. We've had an occasion with the board to work through the strategy of the company, and this is what is reflected now in our corporate plan, outlining our purpose, our vision, and our mission. And the mission being to provide reliable, fair, and affordable access to the electricity grid and to the electricity market. To enable sustainable, inclusive growth. So that at the end is what the company is daily trying to achieve. We've identified several strategic objectives, which are outlined on the slides. One being reliable and sustainable access to affordable power. Secondly, an inclusive, competitive electricity market, a financially sustainable business, and also digital transformation for efficiency and effectiveness. We have a number of initiatives that underpin each of these objectives that we are working on. And some of these, Chair, have been touched on already. If you look under 1.1, which is to accelerate the expansion and refurbishment through implementing the TDP. So that's one of the topics that we'll touch on briefly today. And we did give an initial update to the committee late last year. So today is just an update on that. If one looks at 2.1, around setting up the independent transmission system operator, the Honourable Minister has referred to that because that is at the core of what the Electricity Amendment Act is putting forward. And similarly, 2.2 is part of what we'll touch on around the market operator as to what is this and how are we approaching it. Financial sustainability, I think the Minister has also alluded to that it is critical that this new company be able to be financially sustainable and not be a burden to the fiscus. And so we have to look at different ways of ensuring that we get that right. And of course, as we go into the future and with the independence requirements for the entity, considering all the different stakeholders interfaces with the IT systems will be critical, including ensuring that we strengthen the cybersecurity posture of this entity. So that's the strategy in brief. There's a number of enablers that are required. Strong relationships and alignment with key stakeholders is very important. The business in relative terms is small. It is in the middle of the value chain, but it interfaces with large generators, small generators, renewables on the one side, and then large industries, municipalities, metros on the other, including cross-border utilities that we relate with. So that collaboration with stakeholders is important. Governance process need to be clear and efficient, and we need to ensure that we build and retain world-class talent and capabilities, and that we develop a high-performance culture. The values are outlined on the slide, Chair, because that's what underpins everything we do. So we are working hard to make sure that we internalize and strengthen on these capabilities. Apologies, wrong direction. There's a number of items that we consider to be part of our burning platform. The TDP delivery is critical, and I think we'll talk a bit about that. Financial sustainability, as the Chair alluded, we have had the multi-year pricing determination from NESA for the next 3 years, and we'll be working to make sure that we develop something appropriate beyond that, working together with ESCOM, the ministry, and the regulator. The market operator is on the agenda, and we'll talk about that. And then overall, within the 5-year time horizon, how to set up the independent transmission system operator. Coming to the transmission development plan, this is really a brief recap of what is the transmission plan and its objectives. And largely, it's around determining the new network infrastructure requirements. Firstly, to integrate new generation capacity on the one side, but on the other, also to ensure that we strengthen the network to allow for future demand growth. Thirdly, to ensure that we consider the asset base that we have, and to make sure that we replace these assets timelessly in terms of either upgrading or renewing, modernizing to ensure that that asset base remains reliable and that the network is optimized. Lastly, through the license, we have obligations to comply with the grid code, and there are certain requirements in the grid code reliability standards that we need to work to make sure that we address the areas where the network is not fully up to the standard required by the grid code. One of the issues I think that members will now be aware of is that the whole power system is also in transition. We are moving from the era where all the generation resources were in the north of the country to one where they are distributed, and a significant number of the high potential resources are in the southern part of the country in terms of solar PV, as well as renewables in terms of wind. And what this requires is essentially a reconfiguration of the network. So what effectively is needing to happen is strengthening the network, in particular to the southern part and the eastern parts of the country, to make sure that we can harness and collect these new resources as we go forward. And that, in a way, is what then is reflected in terms of the transmission development plan, specifically looking at the expansion element. We've historically had numerous challenges that we are working to overcome. And as the saying goes, hindsight is 2020. Historically, there has been a degree of underinvestment in strengthening the grid. We know we've had periodic generation supply challenges, and as the system operator, this is something that we need to be very focused on, ensuring that at all times we maintain supply, demand, and balance. The policy changes are happening, and I think the minister has alluded to some of those changes, which we also have to adapt to and make sure that we set ourselves up to support the policy direction of government. The decarbonization is obviously one of the commitments that the country has made, and we need to play our role in terms of supporting and enabling that. The rollout of infrastructure is challenging. The lead times on some of the activities tend to be very long, and we'll touch on some of those as we go through the presentation. And also to note that the network is actually very capital intensive because this is extra high voltages, very large transformers, but what you are investing in also has got a long life. Most of the components have a life of in excess of 25 years, some even beyond 50 years. So what you are investing in will be here for a very long time to come. But as you are seeking to roll out this extensive infrastructure, you also have to address the matters of capacity across the supplier and construction value chain, which is both a challenge locally and internationally. So we have to be working very closely with industry in the country, but also being very mindful of what's happening across the world and ensure that we are able to access the resources that we require. The TDP of 2024 is summarized in this one slide, and what is reflected on the map in dotted lines indicates the new infrastructure that needs to be built, and the different colors. What is green is 400 kV lines, and what is pink or purple is 765 kilovolt. So you will note, just reflecting back on the previous slide with the big, thick red lines, that we are needing to expand both on along the west coast through the central corridor and also to the east to connect with KZN. And some of the key statistics that relate to what needs to be put in place are also reflected in this slide. If one just steps back and considers, Chair, why there's such a focus on this issue is the scale that is required to be rolled out. What we are showing here is that between, for example, in terms of transmission lines, between 2015 and 2024, which is essentially a period of 10 years, we built 3,051 kilometers. So you could say roughly 300 kilometers per year. That's what we've done before. If one looks further back, there was a time when in 1 year, more than 800 kilometers was constructed in 1 year. So the country does have potential to scale up, but not necessarily to the level that is required. If one looks at the period ahead, between now and 2029, we require 5,000 kilometers over that 5-year period, and the 5-year period that follows, you almost need to double the length of transmission lines that you build to get to the 14,500 that is required. Similarly, in terms of transformation capacity, 41,000 MVA in the next 5 years, and the following 5 years is 91,000. Again, a significant increase is required to be built. So, and hence, as we go through, and the minister alluded to this, we are following all options to make sure that we can catch up and be able to deliver through various delivery mechanisms, which we will touch on. So moving to the next slide, Chair, I think we thought it appropriate just to also share this picture because the network that was existing and the recent expansions have in fact allowed us to connect new generation resources, especially in the south through the renewables. We have 116 projects that are signed up. 99 of those are already connected to the grid and 97 are already producing and contributing. So it's a lot of work that has been done to already connect and collect what is available, but we appreciate that we need to do more. And this is just talking to the public procurement projects. But if you look on the right-hand side, based on the amendment of the Schedule 2 of the ERA that allowed private investment and private procurement, there's quite a lot of projects that is already in the pipeline. Just over 366 is already operating. What is under construction and being and in execution amounts to just under 3,700 megawatts, comprising both solar and wind. And there's applications to the amount of just over 6,000 MVA that we're busy processing at budget code level. And the point of emphasizing budget code is when you get to budget code in terms of process, the developer has already made significant commitments and put money on the table to say, I need this connection. And essentially, when we give that budget code and it's accepted, it means we must invest and deliver that infrastructure. So that is around 6,000 MVA that we are already processing as we speak. And hence, a significant amount of renewables are already being accommodated or planned to be accommodated into the grid. But we know we need to go beyond that, and I think that's what the TDF reflects. Chair, when you look at the 14,000 kilometers that we speak about, we take these projects through what we call a project life cycle model. You develop them in phases. There are stage gates where you make sure that you've covered the scope appropriately before you increase your next level of commitment to that project. So you don't just start by building and digging. There's a whole process you need to go through to make sure that your scope is right, you have got the right costing, you've got the necessary authorizations, be they statutory, such as environmental impact assessments or water use licenses, but also importantly to also secure, especially for the transmission lines, the right of way to be able to connect between point A and B as is required. So what this is highlighting is where these different projects are at in terms of the level of development. In the last year, we completed just over 290 kilometers. And overall, since the TDP 2024, there's just over 300 kilometers that has been constructed. There's 2,600 kilometers of transmission line that is currently under construction across the country. And there's 5,000 kilometers or so that is under development. And what definition means in this case is either the EIAs are in progress or the detailed designs, but the outcome of the definition phase is an investment approval that puts you into the construction phase. So a lot of work is happening to make sure that we are preparing these projects correctly. And of course, we are seeking to accelerate as we go through this process. But it has to be done right because in some instances, when you're talking, for example, securing a route, you are also affecting communities. You are affecting commercial farmers and so on. So you actually have to do it right and also to avoid being stuck in litigation and so on. So a lot of work is happening to get these projects ready for delivery by whatever means we will come to in the end. Similarly, the chair, when you look at the transformers, there's a similar outline around the 133,000 MVA we spoke about. 2,620 has been completed, and there's 21,000 MVA that is currently under construction. And it either means we are busy with the procurement, but the investment approval has been obtained and you are basically building. and 35,000 MVA that we are busy firming up the scope and so on. So we are doing our best to make sure that we progress these projects timeously. On the right-hand side of the slide, Chair, is really a similar picture of per annum, where do we stand and what is happening. As indicated, our target for financial year 25 was 286 kilometers, and we constructed 292, so we marginally exceeded that target. And similarly, in terms of the transformers, the target was 2,540, and we built just over 2,600 MVA. For the current year, financial year 2026, the plan is to build 423 kilometers and to install 3,750 MVA of transformation capacity. We do appreciate, Chair, that we are not yet where we need to be in terms of the rollout. We need to double and double again. So a lot of work is really going into ensuring that we can get this done right and get it done efficiently. The last graph on the far right of the screen from my direction basically reflects some of the investment approvals that we are targeting in this year. So once that is approved is what will then move into the construction phase. So we have still got to do significant scaling up. Chair, this has focused largely then on the expansion of the network in terms of adding transformers or building new transmission lines. This next slide then talks around the existing asset base and what we are needing to do in terms of renewing those assets. It's very critical, Chair, that we get the balance right. We should not just be focusing exclusively on the expansion. It's very important that the existing asset base be properly maintained and modernized as necessary to ensure that it can continue to perform in a reliable manner. What is shown in the multicolored slide on the right is the asset conditions of the different components that are in the network. And so what this tells us, Chair, is that there are certain components that are not in a good condition. They have gone beyond their either economic life or even technical life, and therefore they need to be taken out of the system and be replaced. And so what this helps us to do is to actually focus our efforts and be very targeted in where we spend the limited resources to make sure that we take out the risks from the network and ensure that the network as exists will be reliable. As indicated, Chair, again, there is a significant increase that is required to move from the 6,000 of the past 10 years to 14,000 in the next 10 years. So it's, again, a significant amount of work that needs to be done. And this presents a challenge, but it's also a significant opportunity because this is an investment that will, done right, be able to support the economy of the country for another 20, 30, 50 years. So it's actually important that we do it, but also do it correctly. Chair, I've spoken about delivery mechanisms, and so there's a whole range of options. As we indicate in number 4, which is really about private sector participation and independent transmission projects, this will be one of the new tools in the toolbox to help us tackle this big elephant. The structure, that's an illustration at the bottom there, is broadly the nature of the transaction for independent transmission projects, fairly similar to IPP, but as the Minister had indicated, the model that we are working together to develop will be such that once these projects have been developed and have served their debt and investment requirements, they will then be handed back to NTCSA and be under NTCSA ownership into the future. A lot of work is underway between ourselves and the Ministry and National Treasury. We've sent a number of teams on study tours to Brazil and to India because those jurisdictions have done a lot of work and really advanced far in terms of this method of delivery. And there are lessons that we are seeking to take from those jurisdictions and see what is relevant and appropriate for South Africa. Clarity of the regulatory framework is very important, and that's one of the takeaways. And the ministry is doing a lot of work in that regard. I think the regulations are fairly advanced. In fact, I think they've been out for comment. So the regulatory framework is very advanced in terms of the level of development. Transparency in the process is also very important, as well as ensuring that the electricity regulator's role in the process is clear and that they can enforce and ensure compliance for all the players in this section. So all manner of options, Chair. EPCM is what we've used historically. Self-build is something that was introduced probably 10 years ago, where the thinking was to say, if a developer feels they can do a part of the project quicker than we can, we allow them to do that, and they execute and then hand those assets back to us to operate and maintain. And then the EPC is also a new delivery method that has been adopted about 2-3 years back, and we are seeking to make sure that we can also use that to scale up. One of the points I think that's also important that we spoke about earlier, Chair, around the supply chain. Whichever way you go about it, you still need to have construction capacity, you still need to have equipment supplies, you need to have the right skills and labor to actually execute. So there is a global challenge that we need collectively as an industry and a country, we need to tackle, whichever way we'll end up delivering what is required. This slide just gives high level an outline of the 7 projects that have been identified as candidate projects for the independent transmission project procurement phase 1. Which we have got the lines listed there in white next to the map, and those are the 7 lines that in total amount to 1,164 kilometers and 2,600 MVA of transformation capacities among all of those projects. In total, these are expected to unlock 3,200 megawatts of generation connection capacity. So I think, Chair, this will be an important initiative which we are working very closely to advance. We've spoken about the regulations and their status. The Minister spoke earlier about the credit guarantee vehicle and the advanced work that is there. High-level program was that in July, the Ministry would go for the request for qualification, and by November of this year, request for proposals. And I'm sure in time, more details will be shared on this program. Chair, this is really the second last slide on the transmission development plan. I think we've touched on the delivery challenges, but also the opportunities that are presenting. Broadly, it's around land, as well as supply chain. In terms of the acquisition of land and servitudes, given that this is linear infrastructure, you affect lots of people, and you need to get the approval and agreement to pass over private land, and sometimes you have to obtain permission to occupy state land. So it's an important part, and normally in a project this could be the longest lead time, and so a lot of effort is underway to streamline the process in this regard. The other potential challenge is where you have secured a route, there could be a risk that people encroach and put up structures within these servitudes, and then you have to work to actually move them out. So that's something that does present a challenge. But we are working closely with the various municipalities where we traverse to ensure that we collaborate, that we engage the communities to make sure that those land parcels can be secured. Construction capacity, I think we've spoken about, and I did indicate that at some stage we had constructed 800 kilometers in 1 year. But if you look at the 14,000, we need to be at the level of 1,600 kilometers, current indication by 2028. But of course, if you can pull it forward, we would do so. And there's other efforts to ensure that we increase the contractor base. We have companies that are under incubation, and by that, Chair, you may find that there construction companies that have traditionally constructed at lower voltages at distribution level. But given the size of the transmission lines and so on, you actually require to improve and strengthen certain areas and capabilities. And so we go through a program of working with them to ensure that they can do this efficiently and also safely and cost effectively. One of the key issues, Chair, also in terms of the project preparation is around skills. We do have a strong skills base internally that can do the work, but they are not enough. And so we've put up an owner's engineer panel where we have various consulting houses, engineering consulting houses that then supplement and complement our efforts to be able to get this work done, especially at the upfront level of preparing the projects. And then also in terms of constructions, to speed up the procurement processes, we have pre-qualified suppliers that are already ready to receive orders. They quote, obviously they compete, but it just speeds up the procurement process. And that process, we also invite others to come in as they get ready. So it is not closed to a few, but we have those that are pre-qualified, and we work to invite others as we go forward, because that capacity is going to be very important. Large transformers are key, Chair, as we indicated with the 133,000 MVA of transformation capacity. We have one supplier locally that has been having some challenges, and so we've worked with the DTIC to say, while we are resolving the local constraints, please allow us to import. Clearly, our preference would be to buy locally, and so a lot of support is going into addressing those constraints. Steel, another critical part of the equation, and it's not so much about steel itself, but it's also around the fabrication of the steel. To be able to set up what is appropriate for this very tall, heavy transmission towers that are necessary for transmission lines. In summary then, Chair, just to highlight, and I've really said a lot of this already, we know that the transmission grid is critical to allow us to connect new generation capacity as we go forward. It's important that we do the necessary refurbishment and renewal to protect the reliability of the system and to sustain it. And we've indicated the level of capacity that we need to build. What I didn't mention, Chair, is that as we go forward and as you increase the level of renewable penetration in the network, you also require to work to strengthen the network to maintain stability. And hence we will be introducing synchronous condensers going forward. And there are other additional technologies that we are looking to explore, to pilot, to make sure that we have various ways to make sure that the grid is stable, even as we are changing its composition and its mix. Chair, if I may now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Etzinger, who will talk about the electricity market operator. Thank you.
Thanks, Sekumachwa. Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning to the honourable members. The electricity market is coming. It's here, and we are very excited from the NTCSA point of view and from Eskom point of view to be part of the development and introduction and ultimately the running of the market. It's going to mean changes to the landscape dramatically. Over the last 102 years, the consumer hasn't had a choice of where to buy. In future, that will change, and that brings efficiencies. It brings innovation and vibrancy to the industry, which has been fairly boring for the last 102 years, and I've worked in it for 35 years, I should know. It will mean, colleagues, that the IPPs that we hear about, and the Minister has addressed this, will be receiving great incentives and encouragement to invest into our country and into the industry, which of course will be very good from a security point of view. And also, once again, from an efficiency point of view, with that competition coming in, will have a positive impact on ultimately the price and the service which South Africans, business as well as homes, receive. So it's very important that we push forward with these changes. The ERA talks about the market operator very explicitly, and it requires that the market operator provides 6 things. Firstly, the transparent and non-discriminatory trading platforms. A lot of work has gone into this. We're looking at exactly how this would be implemented. We have got an internal market already within the Eskom Group, and what we'll be doing is developing that. The recruitment is underway. Systems will be modified to make sure that we meet that requirement. Secondly, the development of a market code and the rules, including the qualifying criteria for participation in the market. On that front, we've developed the market code. Over the last year, we've had extensive workshops with stakeholders, between those in the room and those online, about 200 to 300 participants in each of those workshops. We've taken the inputs and we've developed a final draft, if I can put it that way. The market code is ultimately owned by the regulator. So what we'll be doing with aim is before the end of this month to submit the market code through to NERSA. NERSA themselves will subject the market code, no doubt, to a public participation process to get further input. But that is where we are. And I think we've really appreciate the support of the public, of business, of the various political parties that have given input into this very important process. Third, the ERA calls for the development of different types of markets. There are physical markets for the exchange of electrons, financial and regulated markets. Again, we've made good progress there. We have got an internal market within the Eskom Group, which has got a day-ahead market, a balancing market, and a reserve market. So what we'll be doing is extending that to other forms of markets, but at this stage we are good to go. Fourth, in terms of method operations on the systems, processes, and procedures, and needless to say, this is going to be high-tech when it comes to IT. It's going to be an environment which has to have a high level of cybersecurity around it to make sure that market is protected, not hacked. So that is our priority at the moment. Fifth, in terms of the provisions for reconciliation, that is part of the market code. We'll make sure that that is in place just in terms of how the market would be governed. And the requirements for participation, the money flows, etc., are all specified in the market code that we have. And lastly, within the governance of the market, that is once again set out in the market code. We have, as part of the start of that process, applied to NERSA for the license, for the market operations. From NTCSA's point of view, NERSA have confirmed and just recently indicated that they've given us a green light. They will be processing that license application. So what we have submitted is substantively complete. It's going to be key, Chair, to make sure that the market code is robust, but also to allow that the market code be flexible going into the future, so that as we go through the process of implementation, we're going to be learning and there's going to be feedback loops which NERSA will be responsible for. So it's not a once-off. We must anticipate that various iterations and revisions will be gone through. But certainly just in terms of the feedback received, once again, in terms of the workshops and the written submissions, thank you to everybody. Those page-turning exercises with stakeholders and stakeholder groups and forums have been exhausting, but well worth it. And we've taken the comments and suggestions into account and once again believe that we have a very good product at this point. Building capabilities is going to be critical. This is new, and it's not only the capability of the market operator, but the capability of the market participants to participate, to understand how pricing works, how bids work, how the various markets and opportunities work, and what are the risks as well in terms of how one participates in the market from a generator point of view, for example. What we've run within the Eskom Group since 2019, again, is an internal market. The various power stations within the generation division compete against each other on a daily basis. They submit bids. We run the internal market. The power is bought by our distribution colleagues, and all the trades that are undertaken build experience. The financial implications are not there. What we do is we, at the end of the day, take the results of those trades back, and we tie them back to the regulator's decision. So they hedge back to NERSA's tariff price increase applications and the decisions that they give us. So it's not for real. It's a simulation exercise which we've been running, and it has gone well. What we now need to do is bring on the external IPPs into that exercise and ultimately allow other distributors, licensed distributors, to enter that market as well. So that learning has been very, very important, and I'm glad to say that we have enthusiastic support from distribution and Eskom generation. What's also important is that for the external market, we will be launching the South African Wholesale Electricity Market School. This will be done on the 24th of this month at the Wits Business School. And the idea here is to, once again, provide the industry and South Africans with the knowledge and the tools which they will need to participate in the market, should they wish to. I think the point needs to be made that this will be a voluntary market for those that are purchasing electricity, for example, from Eskom's distribution division. They're welcome to continue, or from the municipality, they're welcome to continue. The subsidy frameworks that the Minister alluded to will continue. So this will not be an exercise that would in all prejudice low-income households, indigent households, which we really understand need the protection to continue that they are receiving at the moment. From the school's point of view, there is a lot of material already available on YouTube for each of the 10 workshops which we had, for example, on market code, all available professionally packaged on YouTube. There is a simulation tool which we will be launching, which is going to be something you can't simulate over the internet. So in that case, there are going to be physical 3-day programs that we'll be running in the various provinces. We're starting with Gauteng, but again, the idea is to learn exactly how trading works and to see of different trading strategies, what's going to work, and to really get a good feel before that. So that is on track for the 24th. So, Chair, in brief, the introduction of the competitive electricity market in South Africa is going to be a very significant step. It will be undertaken in a very responsible way over the next 5 years. So we've got 5 years within which, according to law, we are to do this. And we'll make sure that each of the steps along the way is undertaken not to subject the electricity industry to undue uncertainty or risk, but that we do it in a responsible way, making sure that the benefits ultimately are realized, which I've summarized. The ultimate point here is that a lot has been done, but a lot still to do. Our aspiration is to have the market up and running by the 1st of April 2026. But not all activities are within our control. We've spoken about nurses' process, for example, of public participation. But we are encouraging all South Africans to work with us, to give it a full go, to get it going by the 1st of April, understanding that this will be the first iteration, and that as the market evolves and becomes more sophisticated over the next 5 years, it will be increasingly closer to the ultimate call in the ERA for a fully competitive electricity market. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Chairperson, thank you very much. If I may hand back to Ms. Mabelane, if there's any closing remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, today we also have our chair of our investment committee. There's 2 critical topics that we're looking at today. We have a committee that provides oversight. They're critical to drive and stimulate the South African economy. So execution for that is quite important for us. It's a priority. But at the same time, doing it efficiently and ensuring that we can actually achieve the objectives that are set. So I'll ask Anu to give a few closing remarks to wrap up everything, and then we'll open up for, okay. Okay, thank you. So the minister's advising that she'll respond. So Chair, then I'll hand over to you for questions.
Yes, that marks the end of our presentation, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Can I give over to the honorable members to interact with the presentation? Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I go this way? You can start. Honorable Babdi, is your hand up? Okay, just start, shoot, and then we'll go this
Thank you,
way.
Chair. Could we have some explanation on the curtailment framework, how that's going to work, how it's going to be funded?
Chair, I've got several questions. First of all, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the update. My first one to the chairperson is...
How many?
Several.
All right.
My first one is to the chairperson, and that's just an update on where you are in the appointment process of a permanent CEO. Obviously, it's something that we'd like to see stabilizing the entity, so that's a very important one. On the slide that related to CapEx allocation for your projects for the next 10 years, or let's start with on the right-hand side, you had the NERSA application, you had the NERSA allocation, which was lower than the application, and I understand that. Then you had the internal allocation, which I assume is the amount that Eskom has said, okay, we're going to grant you that money. And then you had the amount of actual expenditure, which was even lower still, by about 4.5 billion rand. My concern is that you're complaining about underinvestment in grid infrastructure, and yet you're not spending the budget that you're being allocated. Now, I understand that NTC is a new entity, but you're still essentially Eskom transmission. So is that going to be rectified going forward? Similarly, on the slide that showed your rollout against your TDP of 2024, one of the things that I think would be very beneficial is if next to each financial year, you showed what the target was for that year. In other words, here's our actual accomplishment, here's our target. Because at this stage, we're looking at 290 kilometers, 400 kilometers, and it's way lower than what is required over the 10-year time frame. So can we see that NTC is actually meeting those targets? Put the actual and the target next to each other. I want to talk for a moment about budget quotes, because the delays on budget quotes are causing significant cost implications for IPPs that are approaching the entity. Up to 300% increases on the cost estimate letter that they provide. What are you doing to reduce the time frame with regard to those budget quotes? Sorry, I just have to open my phone again. I've previously spoken about the fact that the grid access unit is sitting in Eskom distribution. Now, this is an inherent conflict of interest because Eskom distribution is essentially controlling who has access to the grid, which NTC owns and operates. If you are a truly independent operator, which by law you have to be, then you should control grid access. You should be determining the grid access code, you should be determining the rules, and you should be implementing and monitoring it, not Eskom distribution. And this goes to the fundamental problem of NTCSA being, and you've repeatedly said it, Chairperson, an Eskom subsidiary, because it creates an internal conflict of interest. So what is being done to rectify the issue of the grid access unit? On that same issue, and maybe I need to ask a very simple question before, and I'll ask it as a follow-up a little later. Negotiated pricing agreements with intensive energy users, and I'm thinking, for example, the South 32 agreement, which has recently been made public. Who is responsible for that? Who owns that negotiated pricing agreement? Is it distribution or is it NTC? One of the things that was mentioned in your strategy, the first slide that the interim CEO presented was about digitization of your system. Can you give us an indication of what is being done to modernize South Africa's grid infrastructure? You know, we've got an infrastructure that is 40, 50, 60 years old. What's being done to bring it up to modern standards and align it with the needs of a changing electricity market? And then my last question at this point is the ITP methodology that you spoke about there for providing for or allowing for independent producers to start constructing some of your infrastructure. When will that framework be finalized? When is that going to, you're going to say, here's the model that we're going to use, let's go out and do it? Because at the moment we're talking and we're not doing. And what worries me is that we're going to end up in a situation where we will be 10 years down the line and we'll still have thousands of kilometers of transmission lines that haven't been built yet. So I'd really like to see some progress on that. Thank you. That's all for now, Chair.
Oops. Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. My questions are as follows. I think you are aware that this is going to cause, within the supply chain, a lot of interest, including criminal interest. I would like to know if you have been able to ascertain, for instance, that the scale procurement or the steel procurement that you are going to do will be highly secured. For the past 8 years, we have seen infrastructure being distracted, intercepted, and sometimes foreign-driven interests like Zimbabweans, specifically stealing assets of Eskom, transporting them with the bus. By the way, a Prasa bus to Bulawayo. This is going to activate a lot of theft, steel theft. In fact, it could even be a subcontinental steel theft. You have Namibians, you have Mozambican, you have Zimbabweans. Have you planned your insurable interest well? Are you able to protect this appetite? Are you able to protect this enterprise you are activating? Because if you don't, you're going to have price escalations, price manipulation at the highest level. Lastly, I worry about your insurable interest at the level of the asset. Have you established that you have that covered? Because if you don't, you're going to be coming here more often, requesting monies, requesting assistance to prevent this and prevent the other. Some of these things have to be planned and planned well. Our government, I think, for one reason or the other, we have been a subject of what you will call subcontinental sabotage, in particular on steel. Are you able to say to us, this started between 7, 8 years ago, the lessons you have learned? What are those lessons that you have learned, that you have performed, activated thus far? And going forward to 14,500 kilometers, what improvements are you projecting you're going to have implement to manage and subjugate this kind of theft that is coming? The reason why I'm saying this is because we often pretend as members of parliament that we don't see the underlying that is happening. Our development has been intercepted by criminal syndicates. You should be aware. You should be able to interpret and act and move fast. And I worry about your insurable interest. Will you have enough players who will be capable to manage and support you? Because if you don't, prices are going to escalate based on your insurable interest. Lastly, Chair, I would like to know, if you do a kilometer in a 300 kilometer a year, how much is a kilometer? Or is it based on mountain, plateau, whatever the scenery that you are performing? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members, Minister and Deputy Minister, the Group Chief Executive of ESCOM, the Chair of NTCSA, as well as the Executive of NTCSA and the members. The opportunity for us is highly welcomed to interact and engage with NTCSA. And we appreciate the Minister's earlier remarks of acknowledging our communication as well as the concern that was raised, which was a major concern. And we appreciate the fact that there was a follow-up acknowledgement letter, both from ESCOM as well as from the Ministry, to deal with the issues that were raised on that particular matter on the battery tender, which is actually going to be contributing as part of transmission. So we are very, very much appreciative. The session, Chair, we still need to change the format. We would like a one-on-one engagement, and hopefully, I think we need to align it so far in the future that we can have a one-on-one in questioning and answer scenario with the whole thing. But let me just follow the today's model. One is, we're talking as speeches now, It doesn't really achieve the objective, but I'm going to really just give a speech and rattle off as well. What is the current NTCSA's business revenue model? Why I'm asking this particularly is that we have one tariff, not three tariffs, which is tariff for electricity at the end consumer. How is that tariff going to be split towards business entities that were created, which is generation, transmission, and distribution? Those are three key entities that needs revenue split of one tariff that has been approved by NERSA. What is the current business model? What is the projection? What is the economic model in terms of how you are going to sustain the company? We know initially you are currently subsidized by government in order to create this electricity market operator, which in most cases it's supposed to have been an independent entity, fundraising and capitalizing itself, but the state is carrying it as a liability right now on capitalizing it, which means it's still not independent. It's still run by ESCOM, it's still controlled by ESCOM, which means we are running a model of actually subsidizing the private sector through the electricity market operator. In most cases, he would know, most independent transmission operators are independent companies that are looking for opportunities for people who will bring electricity and then they can sell on their behalf. We are the only country that is actually going another model, in this whole particular thing. So we're not really running a proper, electricity, market operator. It's still a subsidy model. The issue on transmission, currently, ESCOM is reporting that NTCSA, right, is reporting after taking over the assets that there's currently 2,600 transmission lines under construction countrywide on all levels in respect to this whole particular project. And that particular construction is over the cumulative years, I would assume, in respect to what is currently happening. How do we quantify that 2,600 transmission line project in respect to contribution to our GDP? to construct 2,600 kilometers of transmission is massive steel, it's massive jobs, and it's massive skills and opportunities. I think we need to have a matrix of quantification so that we can start adding. It seems that we're not, as the electricity sector, having our GDP contribution in percentage terms onto this one. The other thing is, currently ESCOM is projecting that you're going to be building about 938 kilometers in terms of transmission line for 2025. But in the budget 3.0, we see that you have requested 216 billion of funding towards transmission infrastructure, which in my assessment means that ESCOM is going to actually be spending half of the budget that has been should be allocated towards transmission. For the 14,000 kilometers, they are going to squander it in 1 year. This is what it says here, because your budget allocation says you want 216 billion in 1 year. And your timeline here, when it looks at the timeline, it shows us that you're not going to even be ready in 2035 to construct 14,000 kilometers. So why are you eating 216 billion in 1 year? Which means the next year we're going to have another 216 billion, and then the other year until the money is finished and tripled or quadrupled. So something is amiss here in respect to budget 3.0, which we are going to be debating this afternoon, and it does not correlate. I think those numbers need to be brought into line somehow, and we're still going to pose the question to the Minister of Treasury as to where did he get that number of 216 billion that they have included into the budget. So your own transmission capacity says you can only do a maximum of 938 kilometers. Last year, as my colleague has already indicated, to date, on an annual basis, you have only been constructing 292 kilometers. So it doesn't make sense somewhere. We interrogate the facts and the numbers. We're not the old MPs who used to, let's say, we vote and we're, supporting. We are going to question and interrogate. Number 3 is why is South Africa's economic outlook still reflecting a 0.08 growth percentage in terms of GDP growth when ESCOM will be spending a huge amount of capital in infrastructure, Minister? I hope, we're repeating the theme. Please make it make sense for us. You're going to be spending 216. It should contribute to 1% or so of GDP growth. That's a huge amount of money that if we were to do it right as South Africans by making sure that your steel industry is up and running, 216 billion will create businesses in the steel industry, in the foundries, in the refineries, in the supply chain, value chain people, and all of that. But I heard from, I think it's Ntadesh Komoto, saying that there is a shortage of steel and they only have one supplier of steel, which means this program is just going to be now another offshoring of our revenue, of our income, and actually taking money offshore rather than creating the local industries. Can we implore that at least NTCSA makes a requirement that 60% of the steel must be South African based and South African made? Before we look for cheap imports, before we look for imports elsewhere, we create the requirement of the South African GDP and growth. The suppliers of transformers, there's only one transformer company and it's struggling. The same opportunity presents itself. We can't say because there's no supplier, we're not going to do anything. Can we implore on NTCSA to say, have another program? You need another majority supplier where we ring fence the aspect of taking of transformers to be coming from local companies. How they bring in the components, how they make sure, but it must be a local company. So that requirement must be made very strong in there and be included into the procurement processes and support local industries. We want to see local industries, companies, small manufacturers, components, do what the Afrikaners did. They even had a person who would supply the cable insulation. It was that simple. And this is what things we can do. We don't have to be bringing in complete everything anymore. You have the budget of infrastructure, you have the budget from Treasury to upgrade this. You now have an opportunity to do an economic stimulus. Localization is critical. So I'm going to edge more on localization, skills development, aspect of steel. Let's not talk about importing. Let's talk about creating local economy and local economic opportunities. The issue on the transmission line part of it, in terms of synchronized condensers program, maybe you can spend a bit of time, just come out to just explain a bit on the synchronized technology and how you're planning to do it, and just give us an insight on that one. Or the electricity market operator, one, you're buying from IPPs. IPPs currently do not have the capacity to transmit. You're building an infrastructure for them. Are you going to build pickers for them in order for the transmission of that IPPs to get into the, transmission line? We want to know what's going to happen with the current transmission in terms of pickers. The trading platform, who's going to own the trading platform? Is it going to be owned by the state? Is it going to be owned by the independent market operator, which is still ESCOM owned? The market code, how is it going to be balanced? And the market code, when I'm asking the market code question, I'm linking it to the fact that you're asking for a subsidy for consumers, in terms of indigent consumers, and yet on the ESCOM tariff, on the tariff that ESCOM asks, they've already included the indigent subsidy. So are you going to be cross-subsidizing both sides, or you're going to have one single channel, two subsidies? How do you have an OEM, what you call an electricity market operator, that is still controlled and funded by the state subsidies? Why do we have that? Are we not creating a replication of another ESCOM 2.0 in another version? And I don't mind, we can create the ESCOM 2.0. We want to see an ESCOM 2.0 anyway. We're not interested in the electricity market being liberalized and privatized right now. Our push is to see that the state becomes stronger as a last resort of service delivery. So what makes this current electricity market operator independent when it's receiving such huge subsidies in respect to tariff, in respect to budget infrastructure, in respect to ministry allocation, and on top of it, eating out of ESCOM? I will just leave it at that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me also greet the Minister, the DM, ESCOM officials that are here, and our NTCSA Chair, and also be thankful also for the presentation. Chair, just a few questions. Firstly, slide 4 of the presentation speaks to the strategic objectives of NTCSA, being reliable, sustainable, and affordable. And I think the aspect of affordability is where one of my concerns is, especially with the involvement of the private sector. Economics 101 speaks about price stickiness, that when you have an escalation in price, your private sector in particular are not known for wanting to reduce prices when they're able to increase profits. So in terms of the aspect of affordability and your objectives, will we see prices coming down? And how and when do you anticipate this to happen? Then secondly, Chair, with the scale of investments going into NTCSA, with the 14,000 transmission lines, transformers, and so on that need to be constructed, I think in line with the question asked by the Honorable Mbata, what kind of security measures are in place to avoid the theft after project conclusions? So forget about let alone your Zimbabweans, Nigerians, and our northern neighbors. We've also seen theft take place right here in South Africa. Not so long ago, I think I've mentioned this in Tshwane, a local official in the municipality, the electricity department, sent trucks to remove the transformers from a substation. So I think that if we do not have a security measures in place, we could see theft and those hyenas and vultures and so on are waiting for this multi-billion rand project to be completed. So I think the security measures are going to be key. And then thirdly, I'm just interested in the level of engagement. We have seen that there is level engagement with the different role players, informal settlements, farmers, private landowners. What is the scale of that level of engagement in terms of, and obviously there's forward thinking, forward planning, but what has that level of engagement been in terms of trying to quantify the numbers? And then fourthly, what is also the level of readiness with respect to the EPCs and the OEs? How were they, or what was the process that was put in place to decide on these EPCs and OE groups, understanding that the OE groups manages the EPCs, the EPC projects, to ensure that they meet the required standards and targets. So take me through that particular process on how the EPCs and OEs were established. And then what is the average time period for the handing over of ownership from the IPPs to NTCSA? Once these private companies have recouped their investment, and obviously with some profit, but what is the average time that you're looking at in terms of the handover of the infrastructure? Chair, I think I have spoken about the lowering of prices, with the establishment of the ERA and the transition to a more competitive market is said to bring, one of the benefits is lower electricity prices. And yeah, so I think I've asked my question in terms of when we can actually expect that. And then finally, Chair, I also sit on DTIC, and we've been engaging with ArcelorMittal, and the threat recently of ArcelorMittal to shut down some of its long steel plants, and then complaints by some of the smaller steel companies that ArcelorMittal is receiving protection, so to speak, and assistance from government at the expense of some of the smaller players in the steel industry. But there is a bit of a threat here where we have one producer, particularly of long steel, that is ArcelorMittal. So how is this been mitigated, and what is NTCSA in particular doing to mitigate this particular threat of just having kind of one supplier? Particularly with regards to long steel, understanding that you're going to need hundreds of tons of steel for the erection, in particular, of your electricity pylons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, ISCOM Board and Management, and the NTCSA's Board and Management. And thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, so given NTC's designation as an independent transmission system operator for South Africa as of January 2025, so remember, so we largely relied on a centralized distribution from Mpumalanga. So how will NTC's new strategy specifically address system stability requirements and integrate the new significant generation capacity, particularly from distributed renewable energy sources, as we transition from that centralized generation in Mpumalanga to distributed renewable energy in Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape? So how will we address the system stability requirements Okay. And then the Transmission Development Plan 2024 projects a required step change in infrastructure rollout. So we will have approximately 14,500 kilometers of new transmission lines, 133,000 MVA transformer capacity by 2024, which is significantly greater than installations over 2015 to 2024. 5 times in the case of transmission lines and 10 times greater in the case of transformer capacity. Right? So that's in the first phase. With phase 2, 2030 to 2034, it now doubles. It's double that of phase 1. So what are the critical strategies that the transmission company plans on implementing to overcome the challenges of historic underinvestment, long project lines, we're talking about 8 to 10 years here, capital intensiveness, the local supply chain limitations of steel and transformers, as was mentioned by members of the committee before me, because these are very ambitious targets. So how do we plan on to get around those limitations or to mitigate those limitations to meet these ambitious targets? Considering especially the rapid acceleration in phase 2. You know, phase 1, number of transmission lines is 5 times greater than what was done in 2015 to 24. 5 times greater. In phase 2, it's 10 times greater. So it's a massive jump. So the transmission company is exploring private sector participation through the ITP model. And this allows private entities to build and own transmission projects on a concession basis. There's already 7 potential projects that were identified and an RFQ plan for next month, July 2025. So how will the transmission company ensure certainty in the regulatory framework and revenue model, and transparency in procurement program and government objectives? Because, you know, that is transparency is one of the things where we lack, and that's what creates uncertainty and suspicion. And these were also highlighted as key lessons from study tours to India and Brazil on ITP implementation. And once we can address these, I'm sure you'll be able to effectively attract and secure the private investment for these projects. Because it seems that private investment is the only way we can go, because we have a government that don't have money. And we usually burden the poor. And then also, you know, the other challenge you mentioned was land acquisition, servitude rights, and servitude encroachment. These are significant delivery challenges. It's been escalated to the ministry and to the National Energy Crisis Committee. My organization has a solution for that. We call it land expropriation without compensation. But I know you don't want that. You want to pay for these and you want problems. So what proactive and collaborative measures are being taken with these government bodies and local communities to mitigate these land-related risks and ensure timely access and right-of-way for transmission infrastructure projects? That will, in that way, you avoid, I mean, these are things that should be addressed now, or should have been addressed already, to prevent that delay in the delivery. You speak of a competitive electricity market to increase customer choice, customer choice investment, and efficiency in electricity supply. So as the market transitions with different market types being developed, day ahead, reserve, balancing markets. So what specific mechanisms and phased approaches will be implemented to ensure that there's security of supply throughout the market's introduction? And as you've stated in your conclusion, how will the strong need to retain subsidy frameworks for indigent consumers be effectively integrated into this new competitive market structure? You know, it's fine for those who can afford it, but what about those indigent people? Those who can't afford it, who's not concerned about making profit, benefiting out of this market. All they want is just to purchase electricity so that they can go about their daily business. And then lastly, Chairperson, so while the market code is being finalized and various market segments are under development, the full implementation of consumer choice and the realization of benefits like improved efficiency and innovation that is expected to unfold over time. Is there a projected timeline or roadmap detailing the phased rollout of different market functionalities and the point at which consumers can fully exercise and experience any of the economic benefits which you are touting? Beyond the current testing and preparatory phases like the internal Eskom dynamic energy market and the SAWEM, the SA Wholesale Energy Market School. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to yourself, the Minister, Deputy Minister, Department, Eskom, and the entity that came here today, the National Transmission Company. Chair, first I will try maybe I have several questions, not seven, but several. Sorry. My first question, Chair, will be, do we have enough skill and supply capacity to execute the entire transmission infrastructure and administration, as alluded earlier, that the entity, it's very new. So I wanted to check that, Chair. Also, I wanted to check, Chair, if the transmission system has been completely transferred from Eskom, the entire transmission system. Chair, also on the market code, I wanted to check maybe what is or will the entity employ to resolve the potential conflicts or inconsistencies that may arise between the detailed provisions of the market code and NESA broader regulatory principles or existing regulations. And also, Chair, I wanted to check maybe on the local content and capacity building, that what are the broader plans to ensure that South African companies and labor benefit significantly from this massive investment? And the timeline for the market code is expected to be submitted by June the 30th. I wanted to check, is it complete, ready for submission? Chair, also, given that the new generation capacity is concentrated in certain regions or will be concentrated in certain regions like your Northern Cape, down in the south. While maybe if there is a demand in the north, how effective is the entities coordinating with the provincial and local authorities as to ensure the smooth land acquisition, environmental approvals, and social license to operate? I wanted to check that as well, Chairperson. Chair, also maybe on the theft and vandalism, I think it has been mentioned that we need to have security. I wanted to check as well if do we have enough security to assure that there is maybe nothing that is being stolen or vandalized as we are or will be busy with the project. Last two questions, Chair, is according to, sorry, Chair, this is not the question. Okay. Okay, yes. To the last meeting that we had with the entity, it was, you presented that you invited 6 steel suppliers to prepare for phototype towers. I wanted what is the update so far, to know the update so far. And lastly, Chair, how will the NTCSA's financial health be managed in relation to ESCOM's substantial legacy debts? And what measures are in place to prevent the transfer of these burdens to the new entity? Those are my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to the Minister, Deputy Minister, ESCOM, NTCSA team, and honorable members. And thank you for the presentation by the NTCSA Chair. I also have a few questions I'd like to ask for further clarity. And my first question is on NTCSA plans to engage with stakeholders in terms of financial sustainability. I would like to know how does NTCSA plan to consult with NESA, National Treasury, and others on sustainable funding model? And also we'd like to know, will stakeholders have visibility into NTCSA financial planning and risks mitigation strategy? And I also have a question on independent transmission system operator, Chair. I would like to know how will independence of the TSO be maintained and communicated to market participants, including the ESCOM generation? Lastly, Chair, on addressing the issue of land access and approvals, I would like to know how is NTCSA engaging with landowners, traditional authorities, and local government to secure servitude and permits? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to the team who have presented today. I also just have a few questions, if you'll allow, Chair. The first is related to slide 14, which is dealing with some of the refurbishments and the expansions. In terms of the expansion projects, I think somebody mentioned that some of those projects were cancelled. What was the reason given behind that? And also in terms of the maintenance, is that within the capabilities of the NTCSA itself, or are those contractors, or are you still setting up internal, external capabilities regarding that? Chair, I also want to ask a question regarding steel. Now, we know that the steel supply in the country is a major issue. This has been a big discussion topic in trade and industry, especially with the challenges around AMSA. And I heard somebody mention the DITC, but I want to know if there's been any discussion around that, because entire industries are suffering because of the lack of access to steel. And given the technical nature of what we're acquiring here, I just need to understand if there's been any partnership or work done with trade and industry to cushion the blow. And then also in terms of some of the requirements, right? I assume this is probably around slide, okay, now I don't know what slide number it is, but it's around the prototype, the final prototype inspections. There was a mentioning there that those would have been ready in December 2024 from contractors. Were those successful? It's now June 2025, we're 6 months later. Where are we in that? And I think if I'm right, the portfolio committee on the 4th of December last year, that's when the NTCSA came to us as well, right? And you stated that you had 6 steel suppliers to prepare those prototype towers. If you could just update us on that process, especially given that it's now June 2025. And then, Chair, a very big important question here is around the framework, the wheeling framework. What progress has been made in finalizing that wheeling framework? And what has been the status or the progress as well with the regulator, that's NTCSA, to ensure the successful use of ESCOM infrastructure to allow third parties to carry their power? As we all know, it's almost a moot point if you create generation capacity that you can't put into the grid and take to consumers. And already there's some challenges there, so we need to understand that. And Chair, my last and perhaps most important point, and a few members have mentioned this, given the kinds of requirements that are needed in the transmission infrastructure network of the 14,500, sure, I recognize it's a longer time period, but even if you look at what we're doing now, vis-a-vis where we need to be, I think we're all quite concerned about the timelines and the process in which we're moving. It's just not fast enough. And so the question, Chair, is how will the ITP assist or enhance in the ramping up of the transmission infrastructure to realize this 14,500 kilometers of infrastructure required in the TDP, and whether we think we're going to meet these targets both in phase 1 and phase 2. And then I echo Honourable Milam's request, if we could have a breakdown of each financial year, what we're expecting by when. It also makes our job a little bit easier in holding you accountable, because we are just seeing very large numbers over large periods of time. And that's why we are very worried about, number one, the budget, as has been mentioned, the actual capital cost of the infrastructure, but the ability to do it. And I'm very interested to know what we're going to be doing with the ITP relative to these goals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, honorable members. Yeah, I think let's give over to the chairperson and also ESCOM if there's a need for it. But chairperson and CEO, delegate your questions accordingly.
Chair, may I request the Minister to perhaps set context on some of the policy issues that we have raised, which we appreciate.
I
And,
don't hear you. You asked the Minister to do what?
To just provide context on some of the policy on the ITP context and any
Or you
other
want
than...
him to start?
Yes, then I will
Oh.
take it from there. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Chair, and just to thank the members of the committee for the comprehensiveness of the questions. As the Chair's indicated, just on the issues of a policy nature. So the first thing is that we have raised with the ESCOM group, the CEO has been privy to those conversations together with the chair of the ESCOM group, is that we have not fully unpacked the political economy of the energy complex, and that ESCOM should be front center of those conversations. So if you had to look at the previous 7 bid windows, you'll see that there's been an injection of over 240 billion rands into the program, but we have not been able to build a single industry on the back of those investments. So what that means is that we have exported opportunities to other jurisdictions, and we have failed to design a more deliberate and intentional program to ensure that there's a correlation between investments in the energy space and economic growth. So just to say to colleagues that have raised the issues around what are the things that we'll be doing, I want to confirm, Honorable Thring, through you, Chair, that we are coordinating these interventions with Minister Tau It can be the case that you have a situation, as explained in the presentation, that with regards to large transformers, as an example, there's no local supplier of class 4, and already we have an appreciation of what that demand is. So we'll take those conversations to the level of the board of NTCSA. We will have a class 4 manufacture of transformers. So I'm making that point. Our engagements across the globe, there are parties that will come into the country and ensure that there's majority local participation in those investments to ensure that we are able to have local production. Just to say, Honorable Crown Prince and Honorable Tring, we are working on those. So it can be that we have invested so much money, but we have not been able to build an industry. And we are looking beyond our own build program because we are confident that we will be able to go into the continent. So we should be the drivers of that, including the issues around steel. I will not go into the depth with regards to AMSA. I think Minister Tau is dealing with it the other side. We will be going to cabinet on how we want to resuscitate some of the industries that relies on electricity, or let me rephrase it, where electricity is a big part of the input operational cost, and as a result of runaway tariff increases, they've become more and more uncompetitive, and they've been forced to close. So we'll come and share with you. We're going to cabinet, I think, cabinet committee next week, and that other week, cabinet proper, and we'll come to share with you. There's that level of ambition that is driving us. We don't think that the instrument of the negotiated price agreement in its current form goes a long way in supporting economic development. So we must be intentional about that. And we have seen that a lot of these opportunities have been exported to other parts of the world, while we're sitting with the primary minerals, if you like, the ores are sitting with us, huge deposits, but we are not seeing that benefit because of the cost of electricity. So I want to give colleagues, honorable members, the comfort that it's something, it's at an advanced stage, we'll come to you and share with you. It's really in line with what you have raised, including the issues of steel. So you can see here that on the transformers or on the steel, the suppliers that are all international have been accredited, pre-qualified 22, up from 8, but the operating weight is that they are international, so they are outside the country. We will have that production here. So that's the comfort I'll give you. What is the size of that production will come, it's a function of conversation. And then at the superficial level, you'll argue that there's a premium to be paid. Yes, you can argue that there's a premium. I'm seeing it differently. It's an incentive for local production, skills generation, broadening the manufacturing base, and we'll see the return in the National Revenue Fund. And that which we refer to as a premium gets to be recovered and will support the poor through that instrument. But over time, once there's a guarantee of take, I think they'll invest more and more in bringing down the cost of production, and they'll become more competitive. So you can't build invest 440 billion, and there's no economy. It just doesn't work that way. So I want to give you that comfort. The last point I want to make on the issues that are of a transversal nature, and so I think your observations are correct in that one of the things that can undermine this build program is the right of way, the issues around servitude. There is a law in the country, and that law is expropriation. We are going to use that instrument. It's the law of the land. There are candidate sites we have identified, we have exhausted what the law says must be exhausted, and the next instrument is exactly that. It will be exercised in favor of our people, essentially the South African economy. So I want to emphasize the law of the land will be implemented, unless if ourselves as legislatures, you change it, then that's fine. But where I'm at, we are expropriating, having exhausted all of the above. And that's we have set up a ministerial committees, myself, Minister McPherson. The team has done all that they could. They've reached a point where there's an impasse. The only tool that is available to us is expropriation. We do that because the law says we can do it. And then we are able to enable, if you like, the issues around the rollout of infrastructure. And then we have agreed that the candidate projects or packages of projects that are going to go out, the 7, there'll be what we call late stage tender. What do we mean by that? We're not going to burden the EPC, of course it's an EPC plus F, or if you like the developer, we will not burden them with the responsibility of expropriating. We'd have done that ourselves. We'd have acquired the EIA and all of that so that when someone is a preferred bidder, all of those have been resolved and all that they have to focus on is around is on execution. So that's how we've designed the program. And what the team is doing at the technical level is to also work out on what are these next candidate sites so that you resolve all of the above. And then we're able to accelerate the program. Just maybe the last point to make is we will resolve the issues internally on the who's responsible for grid access. You can access the grid at 3 levels. You can access the grid at the municipal space. You can access the grid at the distribution that is owned by Eskom distribution. You can access the grid at the level of transmission. So it doesn't follow that Eskom is conflicted. We're going to resolve that. And it might as well be that all these parties, that the municipalities have a vested interest on who access their assets. Eskom distribution have got a vested interest who access my assets. Transmission has got a vested interest on who access my assets. So it doesn't follow. I think it's a reductionist articulation to suggest that the Eskom is conflicted. No, it doesn't. All of these parties are invested in who is getting access to my space. And like I said, we'll come back and share with you how we're going to resolve. It's a very vexed question. It's a contested space, I must say that. The policyholder will resolve that question on behalf of the parties that could be perceived to be conflicted. But in the course of getting to that, we will engage everyone and that determination will be made. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Minister. Chair, if I may start.
Chair, just a quick point.
Just until the chairperson comes back, just before we get into the technical questions, Honorable Nchabeleng has a very quick follow-up related to what the minister said. So to be fair, if there's any quick follow-ups to the minister's comments, let's take them now. And Honorable Nchabeleng, you'll be first. Are there any other members on what the minister has put forward before the technical issues? Okay, Honorable Paulson, Honorable Mbata, I'm closing it there in that order, quickly.
Oh, thank you so much. The Minister of Artsabela, or compensation, and he's referring to compensation, but he's not being specific and categorical. There is compensation, there is expropriation with compensation, and there is expropriation without compensation. So we want clarity on that one. Artsabela, Minister, or expropriation, and just be vague. That's the most important question, and quickly one on the issue of the owner of the asset. Artsabela, Minister, we're with you here. Tell us clear and direct. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Minister, Honorable Nchabeleng covered me partially. I want an idea as to what compensation is going to cost us for expropriating, because that's not expropriation. That's just buying land. It defeats the purpose. What are we looking at?
And then Honorable Mbata.
Chair, I would like the minister to ascertain if it could be possible that the previous instruments used by the NSY Minister of Public Enterprise could be utilized for this period. There was a period in our time where stealing steel was the most fashionable business. the state lost so much in its asset value. And it was also at a point where it was the construction of Gautrain. I remember there was X kilometers of Gautrain that were affected mid-construction. We cannot go back again. We cannot, because this time around we should be able to say we've taken a lot of interest on what happened before. And this thing of babysitting Zimbabweans when they are not in our country is not working between me and you. If the Zimbabweans can arrest 10 South Africans without officiating themselves into Zimbabwe, we have 10 million here. The Bagas are just chilling. We have, I don't care. We know the enterprise theft that was led against steel. It was led by the Zimbabweans, the Mozambicans. They split the availability of steel between themselves. And majority of that steel was still stolen from Gautrain production.
Honorable
and
Matter,
later,
let's wrap up because it's
and
a
later
follow-up.
Prasa. During this period, we cannot enrich such theft again. We cannot allow it. Let's find.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbata.
Let's find instrument.
Honorable Paulson, your point of order is already sustained before you say it. Let's hand over back to the Minister for response, and then let's get the full responses to what's been said.
Chair, we can't allow such xenophobia to be uttered in this house. There's no proof that it's Zimbabweans and Mozambicans that are taking steel.
Thank you.
That's extremely xenophobic, and we can't just be quiet and have it in a democratic South Africa.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Paulson. We appreciate the order. Thank you very much, Honorable Mbata. I know we want to hear the responses from the Minister, so we're going to sustain that order and hand over back, and then we'll get the technical responses thereafter. No more follow-ups until after. Thank you.
Maybe just to confirm to Honorable Mbata, without necessarily preempting the discussions that are led by Minister Tau, that we are taking keen lessons from that, the bill program of the past. I mean, reference to the Gautrain and acts of criminality and vandalism is something that can undermine the pace and scale of our bill program. So I'm sure in those conversations we will be able to take account of that and see how best we can protect this bill program. And I'm in agreement that the criminal element, irrespective of their nationality, needs to be pursued with vigor and ensure that there's a rule of law in the country, because it's got huge economic implications. So I'm with you, like I said, from a policy point of view. I mean, outside just dealing with acts of criminality, how do we dissuade people from even considering stealing of public infrastructure as an option for livelihood? And then just to say to Honorable Crown Prince and Honorable Paulson, yes, when I say expropriation, it's within the context of prevailing legislation. So that's what we're going to do in favor of the public. And like I said, what the team has done very well, meticulously, I think there's 3 or 5 of these examples. They've shown that they've been having conversations over a period of 3-4 years. They've been escalating, engaging with the private landowners, and that has not been able to be successful. And the only instrument that is left is the expropriation instrument. And like I said, Honorable Crown Prince, on the issues of ownership of the asset is a conversation that we are having internally. So we have not resolved it. So I mean, I can't come here and mislead the committee. Like I said, it's a vexed question on who should be responsible for issues around grid access. I'm leaning towards a particular line of thought, but I think it's important that we extend an opportunity to the players in the space for us to have that conversation to the extent that we are able to find each other without compromising the principle of a non-discriminatory nature of those choices. Transparency of those choices is something that requires our attention. How do you protect the public procurement program of new generation capacity? Does it carry the same weight as an individual private sector application, or is it going to carry a much more greater weight so that you are able to protect the program? Those are some of the conversations that are taking place. And at this point, I'm not in a position to provide an absolute answer, Chair, but I give the committee the assurance will come back. And to the extent that the committee has proposals, and I know that there's extensive work that some of the members here have done, please let's share. I mean, the principle you raised, the minister is available for the one-on-one and any other player so that the colleagues in a more relaxed environment are able to share what their views are. I think that's the value of this engagement. Both scrutiny, council, and working together to resolve the energy question, and accepting that there will be areas of divergence is a fact of nature, of life, but in many instances you'll find that there's convergence. So we'll invite those. Thanks, Chair.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Honourable Minister. Let me start first with a few questions that I will put context to and then hand over to the Group CE on one or two matters that he can then provide context, and I'll hand over to the ICE to respond. Chair, if I may, starting with the issue that has been raised, which we fully agree with is the issue of the CEO appointment. We do recognize as a board as well as the shareholder that this is a critical element that we stabilize the business. In the context of that stabilization, business continuity is also quite critical. I think to that extent, our chairperson of ESCOM, in his last response, has given an update on the process that we have actually undertaken to appoint the CEO, ensuring that we find a highly capable person over a number of years who will come and help us over the next few years to really develop the next company, deepen the capabilities in line with the new requirements of the ERA that we're seeing. In that context, Chair, I think it's also quite important that we recognize Mr. Skeppers, who's been over a number of years an exceptional leader in ESCOM, leading the transmission division. And transmission division has been one of the high-performing entities, despite some of the challenges we're seeing. So our transition and ensuring that there is proper transition and success as we move into the new leadership, we have engaged with Mr. Skeppers, and we are thankful that he is committed to a seamless transition that myself and the Group CE are working with him on. In terms of the appointment process, Chair, for the permanent CEO, we have now taken the lessons learned previously, and we are incorporated those with the support of the Group Chief People Officer, and we have now gone out to the market to start the search. Invariably, Chair, this type of searches will take a while, and the type of candidates that we'll be looking at will be candidates that will probably have 3 to 6 months notice period. So during that transition as well, we are looking at how do we enhance the capability, and that process will be finalized in the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and is a priority as a board. What I can assure you is the internal team under the leadership of Mr. Skeppers is focused on delivery, and we've seen a significant transformation going forward, and we will continuously give an update as matters develop. If, Chair, I may go back to the issue of perhaps a bit of background around NTSA. So when you do unbundling of divisions, the divisions have very good systems, processes, and teams that we carved out of the group and we transferred into the new entity. Having said that, we recognize that the new mandates and the capacity for execution for investment was quite significant. So we then agreed with the group in terms of capability metrics and how we transition in terms of that. The fundamental resources and capability to run the business have been transferred, and over the last year we've been capacitating ourselves, and Andrew also spoke about the new capacity that we're building around the market operator and the central purchasing agency requirements. At the same time, there are certain critical resources. We're operating in an environment where things like digital, that we'll come back to later on, are evolving and transitioning at pace. We then assess those type of risks and said, where do we still want to rely on the group for certain expertise so that we don't put this small and young entity under risk. So we have a proper SLA that we've defined that gives us clear deliverables between us and the group on some of those skills whilst we're actually incrementally building capability. For us, it's quite important. It does not at all compromise our independency, but it gives us the assurance that we mature in a thoughtful and deliberate manner. At the back of that, when we then carved out, we also transferred the assets of division of distribution and its related liabilities. And I just want to reemphasize only its liabilities for those assets to NTSA. And as a result of that, we then assessed the capital structure of NTSA. Later on, I will invite the chair of IFC to just talk about that. And we have now applied jointly with ESCOM a ring-fence tariff for NTSA, and we have a balance sheet. Chair, so from our side, we've got a financial statement. We'll have a financial plan that goes into the corporate plan for NTSA. There's been a mention of the 206 billion allocation. I'm going to ask then, just to build on what I've said, to say from an NTSA perspective as a standalone, for the next 5 years, looking at the financial metrics, the ring-fenced tariffs from NESA, we're comfortable that between us and the ITPs in the execution of the 5-year program, we are financially sound. We continue to debate because the future is not certain, and we're in a dynamic environment where we need to enhance. We're having those conversations with our shareholder. But we are still within a group, and we're working within a broader parameter of the group. And I'll ask the group CE to just talk about the 216 billion in relation to what it relates to and how we fit into the ESCOM group from a financial viability as well.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, 2 questions. And the first one, of course, is the issue around the provisions from Budget 3.0. These provisions are a continuation of the government state support for ESCOM debt relief. It's actually part of the last portion that needs to be concluded so that the full 440 billion rands of equity can be injected into the business. So that allocation really talks to it. It is, of course, from the full pot that the allocation of capital to the various parts of the business occurs. And within that context, the requirements for NTCSA's portion of own transmission line and substation construction gets allocated from that point onwards. And hence the comment that the chair of NTCSA has just made, that from where we sit for the next 5 years, the provision has been made in that regard. But that amount that the Minister of National Treasury spoke about has to do with specifically obliterating the remaining portion of the debt relief package. There was also a question asked earlier as to who owns the NPAs, is this distribution or NTCSA? The customers who are having NPAs as we speak are customers of the distribution business. So the distribution business owns the NTCSA. We are in the middle of unbundling the organization. The unbundling roadmap sketched that 3 subsidiaries needs to be created. The how and specific details thereof were left to the business to work with the shareholder to navigate. We are doing exactly that process now. We are assessing each and every part of this unbundling so that it can respond to the aspirations of the Act as promulgated, and also take into consideration the nuances of the operational implications of the subsidiaries that will emerge out of this. This is the work that at NTCSA level, at holdings level, we are besieged with the leadership of the minister. It does have aspects that talk to the industry overall and the accommodation of the private sector players. All of us come with views and interests. NERSA plays the regulator in the space as a neutral party. We provide our inputs into those aspects, but the business structures that will emerge out of this process in line with the aspirations of the government, have to be sound businesses that protects the interest of South Africans, and we're navigating those issues as we go through. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Chair, if I may then go into a number of the questions, we will group them, if that's fine, as we answer them. Let me first then ask Mr. Skeepers to address a number of issues that have been raised relating to the TDP, including issues of our ability to execute, as well as giving the committee comfort of what have we learned from the past and how we are moving forward in the execution. He will be followed by Andrew, who will take a few questions on the market operator after Skomoto has set context on the market operator. Thereafter, I'll ask the chair of IFC to just deal with the issues of tariff approach and the financial viability. With that, Chair, I will ask Mr. Skeepers to come through.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you, Ms. Mabelane. Chair, yes, I will go through a number of the questions. I think several have been covered by the Minister in his session. So let me just perhaps address the following. With regard to the ITP, I think there's a question around when the framework will be finalized. As we indicated earlier, the regulations are very well advanced. In fact, they are out for public comment. And part of the work that is now in progress is really to finalize the framework with a view to be able to issue a request for qualification, which is targeted for July. And then there'll be a request for proposal down the line, and out of that, similarly to the IPP procurement program, we then expect that the ministry will have done the evaluation and identified who are the successful bidders for these projects. There was a question about how long does it take then to transfer these assets back to NTCSA. The periods differ, and this is part of what still needs to be finalized. However, if you look at the different jurisdictions, Brazil, India, they range from 20 years to 35 years. So there'll have to be a determination made as to what is appropriate for our environment. But it is a long-term investment that you are expecting a private developer to make into the infrastructure, and they need to recoup their investment over that period, and then that asset will then be transferred back into state hands, and hence we refer to it as a concession. Regarding, Chair, the matters of security, I think the Minister has referred to that already. What I can say as we speak, for all the projects that we are rolling out, we do have security that is in place to protect these assets during constructions, and once they move into maintenance, we do have security capability to look after these assets after that. Of course, there's a lot of reliance on South African police services. There's reliance on communities to be partners in these projects, and also landowners in general, because they are our eyes and our ears. The infrastructure is extensive across the country, so we can't be everywhere all the time, and hence we need to have those partnerships to make sure that these assets are looked after, and if there's any attempts that steps are taken to notify us, and then we can activate our security personnel. Alternatively, also the police can step in. And there has been quite a lot of support from the police services in this regard. Chair, there was a question around what is the price of 1 kilometer of transmission line. Chair, it is not a static number. It's really very much dependent on, firstly, the voltage level that you are constructing at is very dependent on the territory that you are traversing. So between 400 kV and 765, there's a whole significant difference in terms of the height, the size of the steel that you require, the strength that you require, the foundations, and between the flatlands of the Free State and the mountains of the Cape provinces, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, you'll have very diverse ranges of prices. So if you get an average, it really can only be indicative. It is not something that you can really pinpoint because it is not standard. What is standard and what you try to bring down would be, for example, the cost of conductor, the cost of steel in terms of rand per ton. That's what you would like to bring down. But obviously a higher, and the nature of, for example, the tower in question, we refer to, for example, you have suspension towers, you have strain towers, depending on whether it's a tower that's where you need to bend the line. All of those have huge impacts on the price. So it is not something that one can cite a straightforward number. Chair, there was also a question around synchronous condensers to request that we explain this a little bit more. So, Chair, it's a little bit technical, but I'll try to explain it, hopefully in a way that I understand it. Part of our electricity system is alternating current, it's AC, and that is actually driven by the frequency at which the generators, the turbines are turning at the power station. So that is what gives you the alternating current. What does happen then is when you move to the renewables, especially wind and solar, these are inverter based. So the outcome of that electricity actually gives you a not so constant frequency as an outcome. And so we colloquially speak of saying you also need to assess the strength of the network. So if you look at Mpumalanga, you have lots of big power stations. The mass of those generators contribute what is called inertia to the system. Whereas when you're looking at the inverter base, this is digital. So you are not getting the benefit of that rotating mass. Which is what gives you strength and stability of the electrical power system. And so synchronous condensers are literally similar to generators in that they are a rotating mass, but they are not producing electricity. They are connected to the network to provide that strength that flows from the rotating mass in that they actually produce. So that is essentially the difference. So the configuration and location of the synchronous condensers that we require, a lot of it will be between the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and a few in the Northern Cape, because these are the areas where, relative to Mpumalanga, you don't have lots of rotating mass. And therefore, you're going to be placing them there to provide that support to the network, to strengthen the network, so that in the event there is a transient fault on the lines, which does happen, you actually sustain continuity of supply and the network does not become unstable. So it's a fairly mature technology, Chair, and that's what we will be implementing in the first phase. But there are newer technologies that are also under development, such as grid forming inverters. This is still fairly new, and there's a lot of focus to make sure that we understand the new technology. We look at how we can pilot it, and eventually how we get the right grid code to specify it, the right standards, because all of these things need to be compatible across the power system. So you can't just plug it in. You actually need to make sure that you have the right standards in terms of the requirement that will then go into the future phases as we roll out the infrastructure. Chair, there was a question around the
Curtailment.
Curtailment. Oh, apologies. Yes, curtailment, Chair, is another important consideration. So maybe just to start off by giving a contrast. If you look at the large power stations, Medupi, Letabo, these stations are dispatchable in terms of the nature of the generation. You expect them to operate at a high load factor. So you expect that 24/7 they are producing all the time. If you take Quebec, it's 90% plus that it is producing all the time. So the way you integrate such a facility, you literally have a high utilization of that asset all the time. Although it might vary, but it is a very high utilization. In contrast, when you look at the variable renewable resources, the wind and solar, clearly their performance is really very much dependent on the environmental conditions. Is it daylight? Is it nighttime? Is it windy or not? And so their output is not as constant and as predictable. It is probabilistic. And so the idea around curtailment is to say, I can have a network that can evacuate 200 megawatts. And so I can say, if it is a coal station, I can only accommodate 200 megawatts. But if it is renewable and the diversity of the dispersion of these resources across the country or a region means that at any one point, it is not guaranteed that what is there will produce the 200 megawatts and that the network will be fully utilized. So based on that diversity, you are then saying, let me connect 250 instead of 200. On average, I expect that I'll be able to accommodate for more than 90% the 200 because not everything produces it at the same time. There may be occasion when there is a coincidence that all these facilities are producing the 250, in which case you then have to say, reduce that 250 to 200 for that time when the production is too high, the wind is too strong or whatever. So it's a probabilistic approach to saying we can accommodate more using the same infrastructure. We do have a risk of having overcapacity at some stage and having to reduce it. How this will be funded, Chair, is that we've already made some provision in what we submitted to NESA because the application for curtailment was there prior to even making the tariff application. So the provisions for funding curtailment is already provided for, and NESA has approved a certain amount, and there are conditions that they have attached to saying, as we are rolling this out, we require periodic reports, we need to review, we need to assess, and to be clear that whether this is effective and efficient, and then they can make a different determination in the period ahead. So that is where we are with regard, Chair, to curtailment. And then, Chair, I think there was a question around the business revenue. I think we leave that to Ms. Mabelani and to Anu. There are some questions on the, oh yes, this question around coordination. Yes, Chair, there was a question around that, as we said, there's a lot of concentration of variable renewables looking to the southern part of the country, Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and to say how are we dealing with the coordination. So, Chair, the approach we follow is very collaborative. At the provincial levels, there are structures that are there between us and the province to interface. And of course, depending on where you are, also the relevant local municipality. So those structures are in place as early as when you are doing the EIAs. You have to engage, you have to consult, you have to be transparent and public so people are aware of what is intended and what is coming. And as the project develops, there's increasing intensification of those engagements with local communities, community leaders around where will the project be, what opportunities are there for the community to participate in the projects. And so those engagements, Chair, are in place, and the coordination, I think, is working fairly well. And then there was one, Chair, around the prototyping of steel towers to say where are we relative to December. We had identified 6 suppliers, Chair, to produce prototypes for transmission towers. 5 of the 6 have been certified. They have done what they needed to do, and so they now become part of our supplier base, qualified to manufacture and fabricate the steel. There's one more that is in progress, and we expect it to be resolved in the next month or 2. So we will then have these 6 as sustainable or as available to provide the type of towers that we require. There was a question, Chair, around maintenance, whether we do it internally or if it is outsourced. The strategy is a mixed one. There's first-line maintenance that we do. Our staff are trained and qualified, but depending on the level of complexity and the frequency of maintenance, there's some, for example, if you look at transformers, there are components called tap changers. This is fairly specialized. And so you then get somebody that will just maintain that, and it is not a daily thing. It might be once in 3 years, once in 5 years, so you don't really have justification to have that capability in-house. Part of the maintenance work also includes, for example, with regard to the transmission lines, ensuring that we maintain the vegetation within the servitude, because if it grows too high, you have a fire, you're going to, in fact, trip the line, or if you have trees that grow, they will cause faults. So those we also largely outsource. We do supervise the work, but we have several contractors across the country that then will come in and help clear that vegetation and make sure that the servitude is in an adequately maintained position. And then, Chair, we've noted the point and the suggestion that said we should be showing what level of infrastructure is expected per year and to have a comparative of what is the actual. So we'll build that into the future as we go forward. We appreciate that suggestion. Perhaps, I think with that, I believe I've covered most, if not all of the, last question, Chair, was around, has the transmission system been fully transferred to ESCOM? And the answer is that's correct. All the transmission assets that were with ESCOM are now sitting with NTCSA. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Ettinger, to deal with the market operator-related questions. Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Sekamachot. Chairperson, in terms of who owns the market operator, this will be state-owned. This will not be owned by the private sector. I think, once again, you'd have a conflict of interest there, so this has to be the basic monopoly approach that will be put in place. The price reduction that, arising from the introduction of the market is an interesting point. I don't think we can expect that prices will come down, but what we can expect is that prices will go up at a lower rate than they would otherwise. That's the idea. You get these efficiencies to come through, and I think that's the experience in introduction of most markets around the world. When will customers have choice? And here I would imagine it refers to the retail customers. So the market will be a wholesale electricity market, and what we'll see as part of the overall market design in the country ultimately is the licensing of retailers and traders. These will be entities which will effectively buy power and then bundle it almost like your cell phone company and provide, whether you buy from MTN or Cell C or Vodacom, that type of idea will come through. But that's got to take time, and it will be up to NERSA to set their time as to when they would issue those licenses and how that would work. So the market side is relatively easy, but I think that the regulation around these and how that would work, not that easy. We've seen applications for licenses come through from traders, and it has been quite a complex matter, I think, for NERSA to go through. But once again, the timing will depend on when those licenses are issued and when those particular traders and retailers would bundle their products and take them forward. What's important is that we here need to draw a distinction between the network, the power grid, which will be, again, a monopoly on the ESCOM side as well as on the municipality side. What will be open for competition will be the energy that flows through those and how that's contracted and procured, just to explain, so that you won't have 3 different lines coming to your house. It'll still be through the same monopoly-driven grid system. Then, in terms of the question of how will the independence of the TSO be communicated to generation, this is an important point. So at the moment we have, as indicated, power purchase agreements for each of the power stations. So these are very formal contracts, but once again we are in the same group. Going forward, from the 1st of April next year, we'll have what's referred to as vesting agreements with each of those power stations. And basically what that is those will be legally binding agreements which will effectively be a contract for differences between what the power stations operate at and their financial performance and what NERSA's ultimate decision has been in allocating costs to generation. So this is where it becomes quite serious, and the rules around those vesting contracts will be very formally applied. They will be also approved by NERSA. This is so that that's one more step that needs to be taken between now and the 1st of April, will be the approval of those vesting agreements. And ultimately, after the transition period over the next 5 years to 2031, generation will need to compete. Generation's power, either collectively or individually as power stations. We must still see how that turns out, but will compete on a level playing field with other generators. That's the whole purpose of the market. So this is a 5-year transition to get to that point. In terms of indigent community subsidy frameworks, yes, just once again to confirm that will be still in place. At the moment, those subsidies are raised through the normal tariff. If you look at the tariff book of Eskom, you'll see that the subsidies are identified. Market participants will contribute to that tariff, to the subsidy framework, and that will then be dispersed to Eskom distribution as well as to municipalities for application to the customer bases within their area. The question around conflict of market of the market and NERSA, this is, and specifically the conflict between the market code and NERSA. That was the question. This is an important point again. What we've done after we've consolidated all the inputs on the market code, we've gone through an exercise of undertaking a legal due diligence on the market code to ensure that it is compliant on the one hand with the ERA, but also in terms of the various NERSA policies and procedures, etc. So there are 1 or 2 refinements that will need to be made, but again, we've done what we can at this stage to make sure that there is consistency. NERSA, of course, would do this for themselves. Plus, as indicated before, we can expect that the market operator will be subjected to various iterations over the next few years as we learn and as particular issues may be discovered. So that's the approach that we need to take. In terms of the wheeling framework, there was a question around that. It is part of the market setup, so I think let me talk to that. NERSA has given their approval for it. On the Eskom side, we've already implemented that framework. The municipalities will lag a little, in particular because of the fact that when they're interfacing with our distribution colleagues, there may be difficulties in certain cases in terms of the financial strength of the municipalities. For this wheeling to work, we do need the municipalities or any entity, and that will be exactly the same in terms of participation in the market for that matter. But they do need to be in good standing, because there is money being flowed and money will be entrusted to be paid. So I think this is a matter which is currently receiving the attention it needs. In terms of the market code and how it will be balanced, a very important point. I think so. We've taken a broad church approach to the market code. We've tried to involve as many South Africans across the sphere as we possibly could in developing it, and hopefully that has introduced an element of balance. But ultimately, it's the regulator on behalf of all the consumers in South Africa to ensure that balance is actually there. Chair, I think I've touched on, responded to all of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. We're done. Eh?
There's just one point on the financial sustainability and the revenue model that Annie will answer, then we're done.
Thank you, Chair. In order to deliver cost-effective electricity in an inclusive market, it's obviously quite a challenge. And the board is very much focused on financial sustainability and independence of NTCSA. We are also conscious that there will be no loans coming through from the sovereign. What we have done currently is we have an approved corporate plan which looks at very much a solvent company, NTCSA. So in other words, a company not screaming for bailouts. We are looking at the capital structure at the moment and ensuring an optimal capital structure as well as the optimal use of CapEx, and which will then inform the funding strategy going forward. And currently, the revenues, there was a question about the revenues and the tariffs. It was touched upon earlier that this year was the first year that we had a ring-fenced revenue for NTCSA, or for transmission, as it were. So we have got revenues, but of course, it is quite critical that we have cost-reflective revenues, so the balancing act between the cost to the consumer and cost reflectivity in terms of the assets and the rollout is quite challenging. Currently, we have, for the first 5 years of the TDP, we envisage 155 billion rand to be spent, 30 billion which will need to be third-party debt that we see coming in around 2028. So the latter period of this first 5-year rollout period. And we are also investigating alternative and optimal funding models, one of which will obviously include, you know, how do we bring the private sector in and crowd them in to take up part of this rollout. So not only from a financial capacity perspective, but from an operational and execution capacity. There's also a work stream going on at the moment looking at optimization of the current expenses. I think that's it from my side.
Thanks, Chair. The last comment on the GDP contribution percentage in terms of the spending is a comment that we're taking on. As we move forward, we'll monitor that as part of our industrialization contribution. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Are they still? Oh, yeah. Okay, Njabeleng and Honorable Marlet.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Mr. Etzinger, and it's in relation to the wheeling framework that you spoke about. First of all, it's not just municipalities and ESCOM distribution that are off-takers. There are obviously private off-takers, mines, large industrial users that would also be involved in wheeling, and they are ready to undertake that. Now, ESCOM has opposed the issuing of trading licenses. In fact, ESCOM is, Mr. Marakani, taking them to court, taking NERSA to court over the issuing of trading licenses, even though NTCSA is expected to act as a market operator. How can you justify, on the one hand, this protectionism of ESCOM, and on the other hand, being a market-oriented market operator that is, by law, required to facilitate electricity trading and wheeling across your network? I just don't understand how you can be balancing that contradiction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chair, I'm going to touch quickly on the question of the 216 billion, and I repeated it again. There's a lot of misrepresentation because the Minister of Treasury says that it's going to be used for transmission and transmission network build program. So it's really quite bizarre that we have a line item, a huge line item of 216 billion in the Treasury budget. And when we ask now, you know, the Group Chief Executive tells ESCOM, CEO, says that that actual money is to settle the debt that ESCOM is currently sitting with. So here there's a major conflict. If we're having a budget that is not clear on line items and we're supposed to be actually approving that budget and making it final on a major issue of discrepancies, this is something that we need to raise very sharply and we need real answers on. That's a really big issue. It seems that either the minister is lying to the nation by giving us a false impression that they are going to invest that money into the rollout of infrastructure, only to find out that it's actually a debt settlement program. It's a big, big red zone for us. We have to really question and really go deep down in deep dive in this issue. It's a major percent in terms of the budget contribution of 200 billion. And if it is to offset debt and not to be invested, it's a major, major red line. That's one issue I just wanted to highlight and actually indicate. The other part of it is the revenue model for NTCSA. It's not yet clear. Split tariff, I don't know where it comes from, because in the NERSA budget, in the NERSA tariff approval that they came to present about a month ago, there was no indication of any split tariff, etc. So I think maybe go back, we're not expecting the answers now. Go back and make sure that we get these issues ironed out and really cleared out. We need to know exactly, out of the tariff of R1, I think it's 185 now, that has been approved. What is going to NTCSA? What is going to generation, and then what is going to transmission? Just to have a clarity on that one. Because this issue of tariff is really giving us a headache. Our people are paying tariffs, they don't know where it comes from, and are paying up to R4 of tariff, and then yet on the other side they have been taxed. So we really want a clarity on these issues. Then the matter of how NTCSA is going to operate. He answered it nicely, the gentleman saying that it's going to be state-owned, but we hear that there's private investors. What does that mean? People are going to come and build and own? Are they going to come and build and take over and start charging NTCSA tariff, and which means we're going to have to pay for it as consumers? What does that mean? When you build an asset, or you're financing it, or you're doing a debt structure, these are issues that are still open. You answered it nicely. There's going to be a debt instrument which should be repaid by NTCSA. But once you say there's an investor who's going to be allocated land to develop on the land, to develop their own infrastructure, you're talking of a private operator. Is it a BOT? Is it a PPP? What is the instrument that you're referring to in this case? Fundamentally so. And how and when will NTCSA become a profitable entity where it will not be dependent on subsidies and this cross-subsidization? Like I indicated, you're receiving indigent tariff on this side, you're getting government injection in terms of capital, etc. So that is one of the things. But the last point which was not answered, or question which we raised was not really dealt with, was the issue of IPPs and the pickers. We know the infrequency of IPPs, that you cannot transmit them into the network right now. They are infrequent. They need to be balanced through a balancing solution, which is in pickers format. Who's going to take on the burden of providing those pickers? Is it the IPPs themselves before they sell to you, or you are going to carry in that factor and make sure you subsidize them in order to have a business case? I don't expect the answers. This is complex now, but I'm just saying, please put into consideration these issues that we're raising. Humbly so.
Thank you very much, honorable members, but I think it's going to be the last questions now. I can give it to you to respond on it.
Chair, I think the advice of taking things back, we will take that back and package it. I'm going to ask the Group CEO to answer the first follow-up question, but also to just give clarity on the budget allocation. Then I'll come back, Chair, and answer the others in a high level. Then we'll bring the details that are required going forward.
Chair, let me deal maybe with the first issue of money, Chair. That 260 billion for infrastructure covers aspects of transmission, but also of distribution network revamping as well. I'm very happy to take this, and we respond quite comprehensively around the provision from the Treasury for infrastructure broadly, that covers also aspects of what falls within us and what also falls within municipalities themselves. I referred earlier on to specifically what has been a focal point of completing the 3-year journey of the debt relief program itself. These are two separate issues, and I take your point, Honorable Nchabeling, around that aspect, Chair. Chair, let me address the issue of that was raised by Honorable Malam regarding the issue of the traders. The you would have seen an article that talks to the outstanding matter of finalizing the transition rules when it comes to this reform. And the point I made earlier is very important, that the roadmap for unbundling and for reform spells out the direction of travel. The details is what various role players and the regulators have to settle down on. And it's a pity the minister has left already. One of the outstanding issues when it comes to the issue of traders is essentially putting in rules. We have been very clear as ESCOM that we want a rule-based transition. It can't be a free-for-all. It can't be a free-for-all. In fact, the players themselves, some of whom are in receipt of trading licenses as we speak, are saying, can we accelerate the process of setting up the rules of the game so we understand where we are going? Why is this necessary? It is necessary because the tariff approach that is on the table at the moment, when it comes to that part of the business, is predicated on a number of players and a number of equipment owners. So when you start having more players, some of them with no equipment, you then need to revisit the rules and say, are they still serving the purposes for which they were set up before? This is an area, fortunately, that the minister is paying attention to now, and in due course, I'm comfortable that he will give leadership in terms of a NESA-led process with all players to define rules to enable that space of our reform to go through. It is a situation where we are moving at the pace of reform and not necessarily catching up with the updating of the rules. And we have identified this even within the NICOM structures that it requires attention. It is not about us as ESCOM protecting our incumbency. It's about making sure that the transition does not lead to unintended consequences, and at the end of the day, it is going to be the not so affluent users who are going to become victims of the reforms that we want to do. And we're trying to get that part. And the ministry is leading that process, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Chair, on few things in terms of the revenue model. We will come at some stage back, we can share that with ESCOM to give a breakdown. But as it stands today in the unbundled revenue model, approximately 10% of the tariff recovery comes to transmission based on our investment projection that we've shared, which the team shared the number earlier on, as well as the need for procurement and sourcing. In addition to that, Chair, we do have a pass-through that will also transparently disclose for IPPs. So as transmission, we also recover costs that we pay to the IPPs for the energy that we procure from them as well. So we'll be transparent on that as we come back. As a result of that revenue model, for this first instance, when earlier on we said we need to continuously work with NESA to enhance that, is that the very same operating parameters for the ITPs around financial viability, the ITPs have also indicated that they would like to see NTCSA financially viable. So it is quite important that the recovery of the revenue for the investments that are being made, irrespective of whether it's the private sector in the execution or it's NTCSA, are transparent and fairly consistent, because we're also going to be the off-taker of the asset. So as it sits today, and our projection going forward, we've put a very strong financial framework, and NTCSA is financially viable. And it's one of the things that the group and our shareholder was clear that we need to be a viable entity, and hence the role of the private sector in accelerating the execution where we see there's a gap that could put a strenuous impact on the balance sheet. So we are working, of course, with Treasury to address issues of the debt of the past that we've inherited. But going forward, we would like to be efficient and ensure that we're operating within the means of the tariff regulation that is transparent. We'll share those details going forward. ITPs, the model that the team have actually shared, is a model that is globally understandable. It's a model that we've adopted in a number of areas, including the IPPs going forward. Where I understand is that in the transmission system, there are two aspects of transmission. There's a transmitter where we develop the network, and there's a national system operator. Irrespective of who has executed the assets and when they're generating their revenue during that period when they are helping in terms of the funding, but also in terms of capacity alleviation for execution, that the system operator will have access to the integrated transmission system, that they will manage transparently, openly, in a non-discriminatory manner. So that are the rules that are there in the ITPs that we've actually issued. Otherwise, then it's just more revenue collection through NTSA, and that's similarly to IPPs, it will be passed through the regulatory framework. And I think there's no doubt that this first phase will give us some lessons learned that the minister and the deputy minister are supporting us with, and we'll come and share those at the right time. But we're excited to see that acceleration model where we can also learn with one another and share best practices with one another. Then I'm going to ask Khumuzo lastly to take the issue of the IPP and PKs. Khumuzo or Andrew. Okay, Andrew, thank you. Chair, then that will be our last response. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. And I apologize for missing the question on IPPs and the peakers to explain that in the case of the renewables, if the renewables in the market are not performing, they are what's referred to as balance responsible. They will be responsible for effectively carrying the consequences of them underperforming. The market operator will go and get an alternative. They will go to the merit order, they will get the next most expensive plant and schedule that. But the incremental cost will come back to the account of the IPP who promised to deliver the original amount. So they will pick up the tab for that. Thank you.
So far, so good to have done today. I would love to thank everyone in the meeting, but we still have an internal business that we have to finalize it. So you are being excused to leave the meeting, and thank ever so much. Take care, travel safe, those that are going to travel. Remember that there's snow and also floods and also gale winds. Everything is faced the roads. Thank you, you are released. Thanks ever so much.
Mr. Bailam is going to leave.
All right, okay. You can have something, drinks, water, whatever here in the table for the road.
Don't blame us for wasteful food. Yeah. Yeah.
Bye, bye, dear. Yeah, see you. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a minute. Don't forget to say, please. No, it's fine. Yeah. No, it's more than enough. Okay. Yeah. I usually just covers 40%.
Ariko, flight the minutes. Remember, we have to leave at least by 1 to catch transports to ICC. Close the door, Baba. Calvary Tango, close the door. Zelda, close the door. Close the door, please. Thank you. Over to you, Ari. Yeah? No, take this out, man. Hello, brah. Can you assist Zelda to take out this and close the door? Yebana. Puti, assist Zelda to take out this. Close the door. Continue, Ariko. We cannot wait. We'll be late otherwise.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the minutes of last week, Wednesday, 4 June, where we had the briefing by the Central Energy Fund, the South African Oil and Gas Association, Sasol, and Business Unity South Africa on the gas industry and gas exploitation in the country and on ways to address the gas cliff that faces South Africa. There's the attendance. All of the members were in attendance, Chair. So last week was a good meeting. Opening remarks, presentations, SEF, Sahuga, Sasol, business unity with IGUA, South Africa. Discussions. Are you reading still, Jay? Hey.
By the way, the minutes were sent to all of the members.
Ah.
So it's a matter of just, but don't be.
I want you to go to the House, Chair. And then the consideration and adoption of minutes, 28 May, adjournment, 2:07. Those are the minutes of 4 June, Chair.
What are you saying on minutes? Honorable Fase.
Thanks, Chair. Just before I move for the adoption, the content of the minutes are fine. It's just right at the top where you have the briefing by, etc. The only entity you forgot to add was IGUA or IGUA, right at the top. So in the actual minutes, you reflect on them, but here we don't have them. So with that amendment, Chair, I'm happy to move for the adoption of the minutes.
Okay, with the amendment. Okay, anyone? Where Comrade Mbata? Comrade, Honorable Mbata is seconding the adoption of the minutes. And any announcement or update in terms of what's going to happen?
Birthdays. No changes for next week. We do have meetings scheduled. We will confirm whether these meetings will be virtual or physical, Chair. Next week is a committee week according to the parliamentary program, so yeah, so we'll see, Chair. But that will be forwarded to members either today or tomorrow. Thanks, Chair.
Maybe it's an announcement. I just wanted to check if do we have any transport to the ITCC today? No.
Yes, the transport is outside. I saw earlier, Mr. Nkosi.